Yeah, so we're going to keep going. Just a couple more comments about the RNC. Everybody's familiar with Proposal 2 and Proposal 3 here in the state, right? Proposal 2, one of them changes the districting commission, takes it out of the hand of the elected officials, the House and Senate, and then signed by the governor. And now we have an independent districting commission on one of those proposals. And then the other proposal was to make same-day registration legal, any cause absentee, and there was 2 or 3 others. Straight ticket balloting become part of the Constitution now. So there was a bunch of these different things that came in, and all of them have to do with trying. It's a problem that we've seen going throughout the country. The whole country, the big push by the Dems is knowing they can't beat us based on issues. Right? Whenever we discuss the issues, we win. But whenever they just have tell a sad story and get a bigger group, a bigger herd, how can we get more votes? So they focus everything on making it easier to vote. So I just wanted to mention, the Republican National Committees from 1982 until 2018, last year. What is that? 36 years. We were not allowed by the federal courts to participate in any way in ballot security issues or election legal issues, because there had been this ruling in 1982 that the Dems were able to get their judges to say that the RNC was trying to suppress votes. And so they were able to get that renewed every 7 years or whatever. And so finally, just last year, that was finally overturned. So now the RNC can be involved in ballot security and various election day legal operations. And so, in fact, the executive committee was published in Fox News and other outlets not too long ago, about 10 days ago. The executive committee for the RNC, which I happen to remember, had a special meeting to create a special temporary committee, and this is called the Committee on Elections. And so it's a huge deal here for coming up for the RNC, this new committee, the Committee on Elections, to work on ballot security and that sort of thing. And you heard about ballot harvesting in California and some of this sort of thing. And so that's part of what we're going to be doing is focusing on how are we going to battle those things. Because when you look at the election in 2020, Mike's going to talk to that about this a bit. It basically comes down to Florida, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. 2 out of 3. Whoever wins 2 out of 3 wins the election. And so, Michigan is absolutely critical, and, we need everybody. And, of course, last time, Ronna was swinging the bat, and all you guys were swinging the bat, trying to tell the Trump campaign, yeah, we can do it. The working class, there's Brian, the union guys, we're going to be all about it. And we're going to elect Trump. The people in D.C. just kept saying no. I mean, I'd go to the RNC meetings, and these guys from Virginia would, oh, no, you can't win. Michigan said, God, Trump's killing it. We're going to win, And they just you can't possibly believe it, right? But now they know, right? Now Trump's been here. He likes Michigan. He's a working blue-collar billionaire, right? And we got the union guys. We got Terry Bowman's the vice chair, UAW guy, right-to-work guy. We got Brian out here, a big union guy. He's worked hard getting the working class in. So, Michigan is key, and you guys are key, You have your own sphere of influence where you're going to bring people to the ballot box, where you're going to help get these 10,700 votes and expand, because the Dems aren't going to be sitting there. So we got Mike Mears here. Mike, come on up. So I asked Mike to come into the state this week. Mike is the head of strategic partnerships in the Faith Coalition for the RNC and working with Trump Victory. And I had mentioned that you'd see articles complaining about the RNC not helping enough and fighting against Trump or supporting him too much either way. But I just want to say, Trump Victory, the first quarter, so the Trump campaign and the RNC are working together on fundraising and many other things. And in the first quarter, the Trump campaign raised $30 million, and that was awesome. And but I want to say about that is that 99% of the donations were $200 or less, and the average donation was $36. And that's important because there's huge numbers of people supporting the president. And when you donate a couple bucks, you're going to be more likely to vote for him. And so I would just say in a general way, if you have a few dollars to give, always give it first to the campaign candidate's campaign. Because hard money to the candidate is the most valuable thing. If you got a couple bucks to the RNC, that's all great, but you go for the candidate, and in this case, Trump. So Mike's going to talk to us a little bit. We'll be seeing him around the state as we try to continue to build the work that the RNC now believes Michigan is a key place. So Mike Mears, welcome.
I would say that Mrs. Mears, would actually disagree with you right there. She thinks that the most important donation is to the RNC because it keeps us in the lifestyle that we like. But my name is Mike Mears. I am the Director of Strategic Partnership and Faith Engagement. I have been at the RNC now for since 2013. Before that, 20 years working for a lot of conservative organizations that you know. National Right to Work Committee is where I started back in '97. When I say I started in D.C. And from there, I've been at Susan B. Anthony List. I was at the Leadership Institute and wrote for Morton Blackwell for a time. I then, just so I could tell people I could keep a job, I was at Concerned Women for America, ran their PAC for about 8 years. And then, as I like to say, I got tired of introducing myself as a concerned woman, and I got a job at Family Research Council Action. How many of you know about the shooting that occurred at Family Research Council? Y'all? So what happened was Family Research Council, very strong proponents of marriage between a man and a woman. The gentleman came in with a handgun and 50 rounds and 15 Chick-fil-A sandwiches that he intended to shove in our mouths after he had shot us. If it were not for one brave gentleman, my good friend Leo, who saw something wasn't right, stopped him, the man shot him in the arm, and with Leo's other arm, he was able to clock him. These issues that we deal with, they're real. They have implications. And so I'm at the Family Research Council, and my boss at the time, Tony Perkins, not happy with the RNC. We have just lost our second presidential election in a row, and he has had enough. He goes, you know what? I don't like the candidates. I don't like this. I don't like that. He also has a radio show, so, you know, people are listening to him. And so I was working for him, and I was going through this, you know, I'm a hardcore conservative. I've said over and over again, like our vice president, except with a twist, I would say, look, I'm a Christian first, which informs my politics, which makes me a conservative. And then if I have anything left over, well, I guess I'm a Republican, right? Well, here's the deal. Our elections, as long as I've been alive, are binary elections. You only got two choices. And so, in my mind, rather than, you know, pick up my tent and just say, forget it, it's over, I'm going to get out, I said, I want to do something a little bit more. It just so happens that Reince Priebus heard that radio show that day, and so he called me about the same time as I was having these thoughts and thinking about stuff, and so he asked me to come in, and one of the first things that we did was we started to build relationships. We started talking to our friends. We, you know, oftentimes we take people for granted. Party's no different. Party takes people for granted. Oh, you voted for us time in and time again. Oh, you've come in and you volunteered time in and time again. Okay, I can count on you. I want to go over here. Well, you know what? It's always good to go back and just say, thank you. So I came on board. We started building these relationships. A year to the day that Tony Perkins says, hey, stop giving money, he has Reince Priebus come to an event where he gets to talk to his top 200 donors. And so this relationship with Tony and Reince actually culminated at the 2016 convention. Because if you remember, there was a candidate who at the convention said some things that, you know, Mr. Trump didn't like, and we needed somebody with some credibility with conservatives to kind of come in and go, look, I'm a Trump supporter. I'm all in for Donald Trump. And so Tony Perkins, how did that happen? Relationships. And so that's what I've continued to do. Now, RNC is Trump victory. Now, the really cool thing about Trump victory versus the campaign, and I shouldn't use the word versus, because we really are very much together. The difference is, however, if Brad Parscale was here and you were to say to him, hey, Brad, I want to get involved in the campaign, he would say, go to volunteer.trumpvictory.gop, right? And do you need to hear that again? Volunteer.trumpvictory.gop. And so he would tell you that. If Chris Carr, who is the political director, or Mike Mears, so if Mike Mears is here and he's talking to you, he would say, go to volunteer.trumpvictory.gop. So one of the things that my boss, Chris Carr, he is a veteran of many, many campaigns. And one of the things that he saw working in the Bush re-election was that the campaign would have a group of political operatives, the RNC would have a group of political operatives, and they'd step all over each other. And so we put an end to that. And so the ground game is Trump victory. So if you talk to somebody in the campaign and you're going to ask, I really want to get involved, I won't say it again. Oh, yes, I will. Volunteer.trumpvictory.gop. And so we've got this relationship with the campaign, and we are working overtime to bring all of our folks together. You know, I still get from time to time, oh, you know, you guys in D.C., you're all a bunch of rhinos, right? Oh, you're trying to stop Donald Trump. I got to tell you, absolutely not. I've been there now for 6 years. I've seen it before Donald Trump, and I've seen it afterwards, and I can tell you, it's night and day. We are Trump's party. We are the political arm of the White House. And so I know for a lot of people, they look at the so-called establishment and they go, yeah, I fought for them, I fought against them for years and years. I know it's kind of uncomfortable, but sometimes the so-called establishment and the activists actually have the same goal. And in this case, we want to re-elect President Donald J. Trump in 2020. Oh, yeah. I only have 75 slides, so don't worry about that. But I have no charts, so that's good. You know, I still get people coming up to me who say they don't like the president's tweets and things like that. And I get a little tired of it, because then they tell me how they're very pro-life, how they really appreciate, you know, the tax cut. They like hearing about the economy and even some of the foreign policy stuff. And I look at them and I go, okay, so what's your problem? This man, this is one of my favorites, is, you know, he's not a real conservative. He's going to go down as the most pro-life president, most likely in my lifetime. I know those, Norm, I know you worked for the last most pro-life president, Ronald Reagan, but I think if he hasn't done it already, he's going to do it, whether you like it or not, whether you like the tweets or not. He's doing conservative things. Pro-Israel, how many times do we hear politicians say, hey, you know, we ought to get around Jerusalem and make it the capital, right? He says, why haven't we done that? Oh, wait, we got a building already. Why don't we just slap a new sign on it and let's do it. And so we did. What I don't have on there is my favorite, and that is, you know, I always like to tell people, well, when were you sure President Trump was going to be the conservative that he promised? Well, he had me at Neil Gorsuch, right? Supreme Court. And you know what he also had me at? The next morning when it wasn't President Hillary Clinton, right? I mean, I went for the promises versus a woman who said that she was probably going to pull Merrick Garland's nomination because maybe we can get somebody more progressive, right? The other Supreme Court justice, Mr. Kavanaugh, icing on the cake, but what was even better and what just again solidified me was when he fought for this man. Again, I have supported other Republican presidents. I'm not sure if some of these other folks would have stayed in the fight like President Trump did.
They would have folded like a wet rag.
There you go. A white rag. Okay.
Wet rag.
Wet rag. I'm going, what? And so there's so many things that this president has accomplished. Now, I have a whole long list. I can't fit it in one slide. I didn't want to do 60 slides, but I have a link. I'm happy. If you're going to hopefully sign up for some things, I'm going to send this to you. It's good, really good stuff. When people ask you about what's happening in your community, what has Donald Trump done, you can pull out this list. It's fantastic stuff. But we're up against a Democrat machine, a progressive machine, and it's not the DNC. At the RNC, we kind of like to make fun of the DNC because they don't have as much money as we do, and you know, we always beat them at softball, and in fact, they won't play us in softball anymore. I mean, it's just so bad. And we joke that maybe it's because they can't afford a full team. I don't know. But you know what? All jokes aside, you've got a guy like Tom Steyer and George Soros, and what these guys have done that we haven't done on the right with our outside groups is basically, you know, the money guy makes all the rules. And what they've done is they've had best practices. And they make all these groups do what they want them to do, or they don't get the money. So what do? They're always doing voter registration drives. They're always, you know, looking for new volunteers. They're always doing all the things that the DNC ought to be doing. They're doing it for them. And so they're going to have unions. They're going to have all these left-wing groups. Now, we're going to have a lot of union members, right? That's what Trump attracted last time, and he's going to do it again. But when I say unions, I'm talking about union leadership. Even at my time as a right-to-work staffer, my beef was never with the worker. Actually, I'm a former Teamster myself. I worked at a Costco when I was in college, and who knew that I would have to join a union? But that's another time. But all these things are what we're up against this time around. And what I'm sensing that we're not up against this time around is a disunity that I saw in 2016. How many of you can name all 17 Republican candidates? I can, because I've had nightmares about them, right? The ghost, well, no, I won't do that joke. But, you know, they're going to have their own 17, I don't know how many candidates there are now. There's 20 candidates. They're going to have their own little sideshow, right? But what I'm sensing is, you know, let me give you an example. So on Wednesday night, I'm here in Lansing for the first time, and I go to a little restaurant. It's over, I'm not even going to be able to tell you where I'm at because I always just do the GPS and it tells me where to go, right? So it's the Michigan State Pub, right? Do many of you know it? Okay, how many Michigan State fans do we have? Okay. So we've got a Michigan State fans, right? It's their pub. I'm there. A gentleman in a Michigan jersey walks in. Now they're still Michigan, right? One says Michigan State, one says Michigan. They're jawing back and forth, and they're going at each other, right? But then a guy, and I kid you not, this actually happened. It's a great analogy. A guy in an Ohio State jersey comes in. And you know what? The Michigan guy and the Michigan State guy, they were in agreement. That's sometimes how I feel about what's going to happen here, right? We have a lot of folks, They don't always get along. I've been involved in the conservative movement for years, nationwide. We just have trouble getting along. But you know what? We have one goal, and that's to get Donald J. Trump reelected in 2020. How many of you are with me on that? Okay, so here's something you can do for me today. I'm going to send around 2 clipboards. One is just general information. I want to be able to know that you might be able to volunteer or so the other thing that we're going to be doing is training here in Michigan. Trump Victory Leadership Initiative. And this training is basically our playbook, right? Some of you who are veterans of campaigns go, why do I need to go through another training? I want you to go through the training like I would have a veteran NFL player go through the training, right? Just so he can be on the same page as everybody else. And then the other thing is, how many of you know that June 26th, June 27th are the first Democrat debates? How many of you plan on watching those? Okay, so I want to invite you, the few of you that were shaking your head, I want to invite you to reconsider, and I want you to watch these debates, but I want you to also actually host a debate watch party. Look, I'm not planning on finding out from CNN or Fox or MSNBC how the debates went. I want to see for myself. If you've got a group that you're involved in, this is a fantastic opportunity for you to bring them together, some new folks, right? And kind of break bread and watch the debates. So if you'd be willing to host, I'd like you to go ahead and do that. Now, I never come empty-handed. If you sign my petitions, I'll give you this nice little pen. It's got the presidential seal on it. And as supplies last, I'll give you what good conservative doesn't want to have their own Trump 2020 lanyard? I mean, next conference you go to, you can whip this on. If you go to, if you're a dentist and you go to some dental convention, their lanyards they're lame. This is a good one. People are going to want to talk to you about it. So anyway,
If you don't do the right thing,
you can yank them. So anyway, I want to thank Norm Hughes for inviting me. I want to thank committeemen for kind of putting Norm and I together. I thank you so much for the work you're doing here in Michigan. Want to do everything we can to help you and Michigan GOP be successful. Look, I have said this privately and I've said it publicly. I don't really want to come to Michigan and then go back and talk to my boss woman and be there the day after the election and find out that we lost Michigan, right? Absolutely not. You're going to have all the resources you need. You're going to have a lot of attention here in Michigan. We're going to make Michigan and keep Michigan great again. And what was the vote total from last time?
10,704.
Yeah, let's do 10,005. Can we do that? Just, I'm kidding. I'd like it to be a lot more than that. Anyway, any questions?
Yeah. Okay, first, Mike, thanks so much for coming. Mike's been here since Wednesday, meeting with a variety of groups around the state, and thank you very much, Norm, for all the work you've been doing. Norm has been a hero in the conservative movement for years. He's got a lot of people involved now. He was kind of a lone wolf for a while, but now the board is doing a great job. People that are getting ready to try to help relieve Norm of some of the duties that he's had and put some of the stuff together that he's done for all these years. And this group, like there are many other groups in the state, right? There's 3 or 4 major groups, not necessarily all in the same room at the same time. But let me assure you that all of these groups, because I interact with everybody wants to see Donald Trump reelected, because without Donald Trump as our next president, the future for your kids and your grandkids is just an entirely different one than you've had. So thank you, everybody. We're going to have a little quick break. We got the next group. If they could start coming up here, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
I'm going to call right now on Patrick Anderson, an economist, a longtime friend. Someday, when we have more time, we're going to ask him about his 911 experience. He was ground zero and diving under trucks and whatever to try to be safe. really it's a phenomenal story. You can see it online. But Patrick's going to talk us about tax limitation and what we did, what this group did 40 years ago, and how much money it's saved us. So, Patrick?
Thank you, Norm. It's 40 years since the tax limitation amendment has been passed, commonly known as the Headley Amendment. We have some people here, including Norm Hughes, who were there at the time, and we're going to give you a few slides on this. This affects every one of you. I've seen it work. I've seen things happen because people knew the Constitution and quoted it. So after your next 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you're going to be able to do that. Okay, key events in the tax revolt. In the 1970s, Americans were upset all across the country. There were two places where this tax revolt really happened: California and Michigan. And in particular, you see here in the 1970s, government's growing. Remember Jimmy Carter, malaise? We're in a big malaise. Yeah. You thought it was your fault. No, it wasn't your fault, but there was a malaise. And we saw constitutional amendments in 1978, both Prop 13 passed in California and the Headley Amendment passed here in Michigan. Who was there? I just want to mention a couple of people. Al Schmidt, who's passed away, but his son Greg Schmidt's still involved. Norm Hughes was there. Milton Friedman played a part. Bill Niskanen, late Bill Niskanen, Bill Shaker, Dick Headley, and as Norm was mentioning, 1978 was actually the third try. So arguably, Michigan was the center of the intellectual ferment, of the patriotism that brought us the tax revolt across the country. What are the things that happened after that? Well, we passed it in 1978. There are a couple other things I want to mention. Governor Engler, fulfilling a promise, appointed a Blue Ribbon Commission in 1993. You can still see that Blue Ribbon Commission report, which goes through it. I served on the Blue Ribbon Commission, and fortunately, I got the job of writing most of it, so you can see it. The state actually went above the Headley limit in 1994, so we got an income tax rebate. We got a real check, or a real rebate in 1995. And there were a number of court decisions that are important. One I'm going to mention here is the Bolt decision that says if the local government puts a tax on you, they have to ask for your voter approval. And by the way, that includes if they say it's actually a mandatory user fee. There's no such thing as a mandatory user fee. That's a tax. And we have won that at the Michigan Supreme Court, at the Court of Appeals. And usually it started with people like you, people like me, who go to a meeting and say, if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. If you tell me I have to pay something because it rains on my property, that's a tax. And that has happened literally in Lansing and in Jackson. They said it's not a tax, it's a fee based on property you have if rain falls on it. I'm not making this up. We went to court over this. We won. So the key things for you to follow. I want things for you to know. Headley Amendment, the Tax Limitation Amendment, and you see the benefits of having people like Norm there. They really thought this through. It's multi-level. First of all, there's an overall limit. You can't go any more than a certain amount as a share of our personal income in state taxes. Then, the state, if they order your local government to do things, they have to pay for it. That's Article 9, Section 29. Then there's a minimum, it's 40, I think it's 46% of all the state government funding has to go to local governments. So when you hear local governments complain about the Headley Amendment, remind them of that. It requires the state to send them money, which it does. And then the one that most local citizens get involved in, the Section 31, this is the one that says, if the local government puts a new tax on you, they must ask for your approval. So yes, that means rain taxes, that means garbage taxes, that means aren't you happy it's Tuesday taxes, that means if you happen to be around when the sun shines on you, you pay a fee, that is a tax, you have to vote on it. We have won on this in Lansing, we've won on this in Jackson, it matters. And then finally, if the local government indebts you with bonds, they have to ask for your approval. So, now there's some of that games that are played with this, but at least in general, that's one of the reasons you don't see as many general obligation bonds. How can you read about this? First of all, there it is, there's the numbers. It's Article 9, Section 26, Article 9, Section 31. Just read it in your Michigan Constitution. You just go online, get the Michigan Constitution, read it. I always find it useful to be able to quote the Constitution to government officials who've sworn to uphold it. It's a very instructive thing, especially when they look like they never saw it. You know those vampire movies where they, like that? Yeah, it's great. Read the Constitution to your elected official every week. Okay, otherwise you can also see Anderson Economic Group. We've got a nice summary there. I want to mention here, so Norm said, can you please tell us how much money have we saved under the Headley Amendment? There's no way to tell how much overall, but here is our state revenue limit. This is the maximum the state can take from us, 9.5% of our personal income. And you go back to 1978, that's where we were, 9.5%. Now Norm will point out that we were more like 6 or 8% under. Before that, they got it up, but that's almost 10% of your income the state can take in taxes. If you go see going forward, we've kept under it a couple times, though we've banged into it. In 1995, when I worked for Governor Engler, I said, we're going over the limit. We need to send an income tax rebate, and we did. So people got $150 million there. Now we've gotten under it, and you see we're about $12 billion below it right now, about $11.5 billion. So how much money did we save here? No one knows for sure, but if I do very conservative accounting, because we keep banging into it, and it is the Constitution that protects us here, I add up just some of that difference, not all of it. That's about a $43 billion wealth transfer that we prevented by your work and by others. $43 billion. It could have been more. This is our buttress. Remember, all those government officials, local and state, swear to uphold our Constitution. Quote them on this. So this includes the sales. It's nice to know how many taxes you have. You pay a state sales tax. You pay a state property tax. You pay a state gas tax. You pay a state individual income tax. If you have a business, you pay individual income tax on your earnings from your business, even if you are a little LLC, right? All of those taxes added together can't go above 9.5% of our personal income. That's right. So that's a limit, and that's a very important buttress against us for our freedom. I'm going to close, and I'm going to actually pass the mic here to, remember my friend Dick Headley, business leader, patriot, American hero, great man. I was very fortunate to work with him for many years. And I want to give Norm Hughes, who was there at the time this passed, a chance to say a few words about the patriots that worked on the tax limitation amendment. So we all owe these people some thanks, so let me be the first to thank.
Back in summer of 1973, that point in time, before MCU was formed, we had revolted in 71 and formed the Conservative Party of Michigan. And we were on the ballot for 3 election cycles, and then they threw us off. And at that point in time, Jerry Ford convinced us to come back in the Republican Party on the provision that we would get an equal and fair share of our number of delegates to the National Convention. So in 76, MCU ran the Reagan campaign, and we sent 29 delegates and alternates to Kansas City for Ronald Reagan from Jerry Ford's home state. I mean, it's about as welcome as a turd in a punch bowl or something like that. Anyway, but in 73, Bill Shaker, a young economist from Dow Chemical, came and parked in my house for 3 days. And we started looking at this, and you know, the personal income was going up 2.5%, 3% a year. And government income was going up 7 to 10% a year. In a 10-year period of time, government grew 51% relative to we the people. This was on Republican leadership. And so we decided we had to put something in the Constitution. In 74, we collected 460-some thousand signatures, but fell a little bit short. In 76, we got enough signatures and surplus, but the Republican governor, Bill Milliken, challenged it to an Ingham County judge that he had appointed, and they knocked it down on a technicality. All volunteer work at this point in time. Well, in 78, Reagan convinced me to run for Congress, and I wasn't there to run the campaign, and we recruited Dick Headley. Dick was a national president of the Junior Chamber of Commerce. Happened to be a Lutheran at one time, became a Mormon, so when we got together, he had his hot water and lemon as I was having my coffee. And A large family, wonderful family, very devout family. And eventually, Dick Headley had a heart transplant. And when he retired from Alexander Hamilton, they set an empty chair for the young man who gave his heart so that Dick Headley can continue to beat the establishment. So it was really a wonderful tribute to have Dick involved for that period of time, a wonderful man. There were so many people involved in that campaign. I mean, the MCU board at that time we had about 16,000 members across the state. Now, as I calculate what Patrick is saying is, you know, $43 billion equates to about $4,380 for every man, woman, and child in the state, assuming 10 million, we're a little under 10 million, which comes out to like $17,520 a family of four. So if I ask you for $35 for dues, you know, anyway, and by the way, even better yet, if you paid full price for this and you're not a member, not only could you have gotten a $10 discount by being a member, but we'll give you a $10 discount off of membership. So today you go over the membership table and you get membership for $25. So it's a very worthwhile organization to be involved in. And among the other things Dick did, he brought us a bunch of new young leaders like Patrick Anderson. So I appreciate very much your astuteness through the years. He did advise Snyder, but I assume Snyder didn't take your advice when it came.
Well, he did when we knocked down the 7% sales tax.
Yeah. What you're seeing periodically in your newspaper is a little ad talking about a hearing. And if you look at it, it's thinly disguised. What happens is if your taxes are going up higher, or the inflation is particularly good or whatever, the economy is going good, they're supposed to ratchet back the millage rate to fit within this confines restricted in the amendment. And the way they get around some of that is having a hearing. And everybody falls asleep. What do you, economic hearing is only going to cost you 1/100th of 1% or something like that. But next year it's 101% above the 101% of blah, 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 on and on and on and on. You got to go and fight it. As a matter of fact, your townships have an annual meeting where you can go and you can actually set salaries for them and set agendas for them. There are things you can do. So pay attention to your local government. Run for some of the local governments. Mary over here is Franklin Township Supervisor up in Houghton County. Some of you are the public office holders too, and I thank you and praise you for it. And next time, maybe you'll be a candidate. Maybe you become a county commissioner, a township supervisor, township trustee, county clerk. Get involved. And with that, I'm going to call Mr. Mauger. Are you here? Did that cover it? Adequate? Okay. Craig Mauger is Executive Director of the Michigan Campaign Finance Network. That means he tracks who spends money on what campaigns, and I think he's going to wake us up.
Thank you all for having me. Can we take a moment and applaud these people doing the AV table over here? The guy who spoke a couple times ago was bragging about not having any charts. And I was like, oh, do people not like charts? I love charts. Come on. I've got a few charts in mine. Yes, I am the director of a small nonprofit organization based here in Lansing. I live in Holt, literally 6 minutes from here. Very convenient for me. We work to track the money in politics, and we put out information. We do research, we do investigative reporting, we put all this up on our website and give it out to people for free. It's a labor of love for many, and as someone pointed out before I came up here, and we've been doing it for 20 years. So I'm going to try to inform you about how campaign finance works right now in 2019 and give you some information. So I have a pointer. So let's see. All right, so I start out with a couple of quick examples so you can see this. How many of you got a mailer in 2018? Maybe a few hundred of them every day in your house? Yeah. So this is a guy, someone might know him here. His name's Max Rietzy. He's a libertarian from the Muskegon area. Anyone know him? He ran for the state house in 2016. He's a third-party candidate. He was running in a very competitive state house district. You heard about the redistricting ballot proposal we had. One of their arguments was we don't have a lot of competitive districts, these districts that are naturally 50% Republican, 50% Democrat. This is one of the districts that we do have that's very competitive. Every 2 years, more than $1 million flows to try to win this seat from Democrats and Republicans. Max not getting $1 million. He's a third-party candidate. He has $3,500 to his name in 2016 for his campaign, trying to take on people that have over $500,000. And then as he's running, these mailers start going out to people who are conservative-leaning voters in his district. These mailers say, instead of cutting spending, Holly Hughes voted for a $134 million office building. Max Rieksey, less spending, less government, more freedom. Holly Hughes is the Republican in the race. So follow me here. The first thing you have to understand about campaign finance in Michigan, most important thing, if you don't expressly tell people how to vote in your TV ads or mailers, you don't necessarily have to disclose where your money's coming from. So does this mailer tell you how to vote? They're running against each other, but does it tell you how to vote? No. Max did not send out this mailer. And when I called him about it, he said, if you find out who it is, thank them for me. Who do you think might have sent out this mailer? Yeah, some Democratic group is the idea here. Because if you take 1% from the Republican, give it to Max, you win 50-49, right? Now, your side of the aisle would never do anything like that, right? No, this has happened on both sides of the aisle. This happened in the 2018 race for governor. There was some mailers that went out telling people to vote for the Green Party candidate that were traceable back to Republican groups. So this happens on both sides. But it's an example of how someone could be communicating with you who has very bad intentions in what they're saying and trying to spin you to do something that you may not actually be that interested in doing, right? So one of the reasons that they asked me to speak this year, I think, was because of some investigative work we did on groups spending money that were backed by utility companies in the 2018 election. This is, let's see if this works. I don't know if the volume's going to work, but you'll get the picture as you see this. This is a TV ad that ran.
Michigan's economy.
There you go.
State Representative John Bison is pushing job killing.
Bison is a state Senate candidate running in kind of central Michigan.
Michiganders.
This is a
Bison
primary
voted
ad.
against the Republican plan to create good jobs in Michigan. And Bison voted to outsource energy jobs to other states. Call your legislator. Tell them to oppose John Bison's job-killing policies.
So did that tell you to vote against John Bison? Someone smart always says that. It didn't expressly tell you don't vote for John Bison. It talked about how bad John Bison is. It may have aired 2 weeks before the election, but because it didn't say vote against John Bison, you don't have to say where your money's coming from. So this group, if you look at the bottom of the ad, it said paid for by Citizens for Energizing Michigan's Economy. Well, what is that? Someone's getting ahead of me here. This is a group that ran ads in a whole bunch of races. Look at this. I have at least 10 state house districts where we know they either ran TV ads or social media ads, basically supporting a candidate through messaging like that. A lot of this happened in the primary. If you look at $65,000 in one district, you think that's the, people talk about $1 million. Trump raised $30 million, that guy just said. $65,000 doesn't seem like that much money. In a primary race for the state house, you don't usually see broadcast TV ads. $65,000 is a lot of TV ads in a primary race for the state house. This group spent money all over the state. And the question was, where is their money coming from? You can't figure out through normal means where it's coming from, and you go look up this organization, you see that their board of directors is a bunch of people who used to work for Consumers Energy. And then someone who works for a national organization that follows energy spending noticed on page 341, I remember this by heart, of a rate filing document that when consumers wants to raise rates, they have to file a whole bunch of information about their financial. picture, financial background. Someone noticed in this document on page 341, Consumers Energy reported giving $20 million to Citizens for Energizing Michigan's Economy in 2017. How much did this nonprofit raise in 2017? $20 million. This is an example of, if you just saw that TV ad, you wouldn't know that the story is really about energy. But it was about energy. They were targeting a lot of the people who hadn't stood with them on energy bills in the past. So that's just another example. Some quick numbers here. These are trend lines. 2018 was the most expensive election in Michigan's history at the state level. More than $300 million was spent. Interest groups are spending more, and they're spending it directly, like Citizens for Energizing Michigan's Economy. The money is less transparent, and this is one that I'm passionate about. The story of money in politics is becoming very important. It's a story that is so important that you won't really understand how politics works unless you follow this, and it's very complex, and that's why we try to give people information. Quickly, I'll just touch on 3 buckets that I put money in politics into to try to explain it to people. It's very complex in 2019, so I try to simplify it this way. There's candidate campaign money. This is the traditional money. Norm's running for something. He goes out and asks someone, can you give me a check to my campaign? It's all disclosed. There's limits on how much you can give. Corporations cannot give directly to candidates. There's transparency. Anyone that asks for your vote, you can go look up where their money's coming from. If it's a state candidate, you go to the Secretary of State website. If it's a federal candidate, you go to the FEC. Here's an ad. I won't show the whole thing, but you've seen ads like this. It's someone talking. This is someone that was running for the state Senate. This is a candidate ad. It says, I'm running for the office. I show this just as an example. At the end, it says, paid for by Kelly Rossman McKinney. She's in the ad and says, I approve the message. Her campaign controls the ad. This is the second bucket I put money into. Independent spending. This is spending that is disclosed in some ways. You can kind of track it. It tells you how to vote. It says, like this ad I'll show you. Tom Barrett, he's running against Kelly Rossman McKinney for Michigan Senate. It says vote for him for Michigan Senate.
40%, eliminate fraud, and save Michigan families from the highest auto insurance premiums in the nation. Barrett is eliminating wasteful spending, ensuring tax dollars go to fixing roads, improving schools, and training workers for the jobs of tomorrow. Tom Barrett, endorsed by the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. So it says, look at the disclaimer here. Paid for with regulated funds by the Michigan Chamber PAC2, not authorized by the candidate. So why does that matter? This is crucial to campaign finance. If the candidate controls the money, there's limits on how much he can raise from individual donors. If it's outside of the candidate, these groups can raise unlimited amounts from donors, and they can take money directly from corporations. We know a lot of corporations. We know their names. Corporations can also be entities that you've never heard of that could be raising money from elsewhere. So it takes a lot more work to follow the money, and in some cases you can't follow it at all. So that's the first 2 buckets. There's one more bucket. This is the bucket that people love to talk about, the dark money bucket. These are the ads that don't tell you how to vote, but are clearly really trying to tell you how to vote. Here's an example of one. This is from that same race.
Lobbyist Kelly Rossman McKinney says whatever
it's criticizing Kelly Rossman McKinney.
When the state began work on a new state police headquarters, she said, quit spending money we don't have. But when a politically connected developer hired her, she said, the state is getting a great deal in all kinds of ways. A cozy no-bid contract, a building the state police didn't want, a $46 million bad deal for taxpayers. Kelly Rossman McKinney, once a lobbyist, always a lobbyist.
See, again, it says call her and tell her to do something. That's often a giveaway that the group isn't disclosing where their money's coming from, because usually the action step is go vote against the person. This action step is go call them and complain. It said at the bottom, paid for by a public voice. It didn't say anything about regulated funds. Now, this is chart world. I just gave you like 10 years of campaign finance research in like 5 minutes. Now I'll give you some numbers. This is the amount of money in state house races in Michigan since 2002. When people say there's more money, there is more money. The blue line is all 110 races. It went from 15 million in 2002 to 27.6 million in 2018, across all 110. The money is not split up evenly in each district, right? There are some districts that are really competitive. They get more money. People who run these campaigns are better at figuring out which of the races are going to be competitive, so they're better at targeting the money. 2002, 3.6 million in the 10 most expensive races. In 2018, 11.1 million in the 10 most expensive. State Senate races, this is where you saw a huge uptick in money. How many seats are in the State Senate? Man, a lot of people don't know that. I'm very impressed. 38 seats in the State Senate. Across them all, there was $34.5 million in 2018. The previous record was 19.9 million. And if you talk to people who've been involved in politics for a long time, I gestured to Norm, decades ago, they used to raise money to maybe put on a couple of events and hand out candy at the parade, is what I'm told. And they're like, what is all this money going to? You know, it has really gone up significantly. This is the slide that I used to show that. In 1985, there was a special election. If you like history, this is for you. 1985, Norm might remember this. There's a special election to fill a vacant seat in the State Senate. Whichever side won this race was going to control the State Senate in Michigan. This race was a headline in the Washington Post because of how expensive it was. It cost $600,000. If you adjust for inflation, that's $1.5 million today. We just had a state senate race in 2018 that cost $2.7 million. And that race decided the state senate. The Republican, you may have heard of him, Vern Ehlers won the race, went on to serve in Congress later. Anybody live in the 8th Congressional District? Alyssa Slock and Mike Bishop. That's where I live. I think we're in the 8th right now. This is the most, we just had this race in 2018, one U.S. House seat. It cost $28 million. The most expensive U.S. House race in Michigan history. The previous record was $16 million. If you look at this, the dark pieces of this pie are the candidates' money that they raised and spent. The light pieces of the pie are outside groups that came in and spent the money directly on TV ads. So if you paid attention to the TV ads you saw, a lot of them did not come from Slotkin and Bishop's campaign, they came from other groups. One of them that spent $2.4 million was Independence USA PAC. That's Mike Bloomberg's PAC. He funds that PAC. They put $2 million into this race. Slotkin had a money advantage in this race, as Democrats had a pretty large advantage in a lot of these races because they had a lot of grassroots fundraising going on, but they also had some very large donors getting involved, like Bloomberg, like Tom Steyer, that spent a lot of money. Out of this 28 million, 11 million came from the candidates, 17 million came from outside groups acting outside of the candidates. This is my last slide. I just wanted to touch on this, and I'm going to be speaking at a panel next, I think later if you want to come talk more about it. But this is just, you've heard this, and it is true. Michigan is rated 50th out of 50 states for transparency. Yes, look this up. Center for Public Integrity, we are rated 50th. And just quickly, the two main reasons for that don't have a lot to do with campaign finance, what I just talked about. They have to do with, have you heard of FOIA? This is your ability to go ask for a document from your local government and say, I paid for that document, I want to see it. In Michigan, we are one of 2 states that exempt the governor's office and the legislature from FOIA. So if I go ask, like I did a couple weeks ago, if I go ask the state senate and say, I want to see all the expenditures from this state senator's office for the last year, they may or may not give it to me. They get to decide. There's no law that says they have to give it to me. We are one of 2 states. We're also one of 2 states where state office holders don't have to file a personal financial disclosure. This is a conflict of interest screen. It's information about outside income office holders have. It's information about free trips that they get. while they're serving. We're one of 2 states. It's us and Massachusetts. And when you're an outlier like that, that's why you get rated 50th. So that is my presentation. I'll flash this up there quickly. My email, you can't really see it, it's craig@mcfn.org if you have questions. I want to thank you all for listening to me and letting me have the chance to talk, and thank you, Norm, for having me here. Thank you guys so much.
We're waiting for Janice and Marion to get up here to talk about ballot issues. So you can see what we're up against. But if we target it, and we think we're going to be able to target 15 to 20 legislative seats in this next election, if we can raise the money that I've challenged the board to raise. And right now, we only really have about a half a dozen of solid conservatives in this legislature. We got a lot of people that ran as conservatives, some who from time to time we can get to act conservative, but obviously we can't come up with the $47 million that DTE and consumers spent on elections this last election cycle. So it's going to be up to us and knocking on doors and doing the hard work. Janice?
Marion Sheridan and I are going to speak about a mutual issue. She's basically going to talk about voter integrity and what went on in Cobo Hall at last year's election, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and then I'm going to go through some slides, some simple slides. I believe in that old saying, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. This late in the day, we need simplicity, but I'm going to let Marion tell her story first. I want you to welcome Marion Sheridan.
Thank you. Great to see so many faces I recognize out there. So I know it's like the middle of the day and everybody's been here for a while. How about everybody stand up for a second? Let's give a good stretch in, huh? Get our circulation going. Yeah. Great. Do we have some Trump supporters in the crowd? Yeah. Okay, work those lungs. That'll get our blood circulating. Okay, so you can sit down. Unless you want to stand, go ahead. I'll just take it as I've got a permanent standing ovation. So I've been involved in the grassroots for the past 10 years. You may know that I'm the founder of one of the founders of Lakes Area Tea Party. As a matter of fact, I'm going to put a plug in. Craig Mager, are you still here? There you are. Okay. So at our May 13th meeting, Craig will be there with us. So very happy to have him. So in 2016, I was one of 5 people that opened an independent Trump office. And that office was very active. I think it was one of the most active Trump offices in the state. We had a lot of people coming into that office. Man, it was just a revolving door. And we worked very closely with the Trump campaign director, Scott Hagerstrom. So pretty much any time he would call us, we could provide 50 to 60 volunteers for any number of Trump rallies that were happening that October. Not only did we provide volunteers for the Trump rallies, but we did for Donald Trump Jr., Eric, Sarah Palin, Mike Pence. It was a wild 2 weeks there, wasn't it? Did anybody here go on any of those events when Trump was in during those last 2 weeks? They were awesome. So this one morning, we were supposed to go and provide volunteers for Don Jr. And I'm not usually the first one out the door, and I'm often the last one, because there's always one more thing that I've got to do. Boy, did I pay that morning. It came to our understanding that they were looking for volunteers. Now, this was the Monday before the election. So it came to our attention that they needed some volunteers down at Cobo Hall. And I didn't really know what was going on or what happens at Cobo Hall but I quickly found out that absentee ballots from all of Wayne County are counted in the basement of Cobo Hall. Now that is 65,000 ballots. So here we are the day before the election, and there isn't anyone that is scheduled to oversee this count. I mean, I can't even tell you how panicked I was to learn this. It was just like, and if I had known then that Trump had only won by 10,704 votes, I would have been out of my mind. So we had people that would come into the office and, that day, and they're like, is there something that I can do? And it's like, my sister actually came in to help me, and we'd like grab these people and say, yes, here's a list of everybody that's ever visited this office. You need to call them. We need to find out if they're going to volunteer, if they'll volunteer to go to Cobo Hall. This is what it entailed. This is why I think it was so self-sacrificing of these people. They had to immediately absentee vote themselves because they wouldn't have a chance to on election day. They had to get up at 5 in the morning. They had to meet at a carpool spot at 6 in the morning and be with total strangers. These were people they never met before, to drive down to Detroit to be down at Cobo Hall at 7 o'clock. We told them, pack your lunch, don't pack a cell phone because you can't take it in, and be prepared to be there from 7 in the morning till 10 at night. And oh yeah, I don't even know if you can sit down. 28 people stepped forward and said they would go down there. These people afterwards were totally changed. As volunteers, they got what it is that they possibly very well could have done. Now, while they were down there, this is, let me skip ahead just a little bit. I want to go to the recount. Everybody remember the recount? Man. So the counting, the box number has to match the count. There's a count on a book, and it's got to match the count number that's on the box. And if it doesn't, then you can't recount it. So that happened in over 56% of the boxes in Detroit. Now, our Secretary of State said that it was just errors, but that's a little bit too high to just brush it off like that. And if you can't recount it, the number stands as how it was counted. So what is ever to motivate a clerk to do it right? There is nothing. Okay, so then 2018, a group of us once again went down to Cobo Hall. There were 35 of us. And we got together afterwards and compared notes. And this is what we universally found. Ballots are being duplicated in Cobo Hall. You go to fill out a ballot, and then you hand it in as an AV vote. Now, when it gets to the AV counting board, they're looking at this, and there's a mark on it, or something's not clear. So they put it in a bin to be duplicated. So the bins are filling up. And we're kind of like, so there's 35 of us, and we are trying to oversee how they're going to duplicate these ballots. And they are duplicating, you have a poll worker that was hired and paid just the week before, trained, and they're just sitting there many times by themselves filling out the ballots. Filling out the ballots. That's illegal. You have to have a representative from both major parties. Now this is the problem. We go to Cobo Hall, and it's like, if it wasn't for us 35, there is not a Republican representative in the room. So, and there certainly aren't Republican representatives at every counting board. So these people are, and I think they're short on help. So whatever, they know. I'm sure that in their training, they were not told, just go ahead and fill out the ballots on your own. So I think Penny Kreider, Penny's not here, is she? Okay, so at one point I was standing back and I'm watching Penny Kreider, and she actually pulls a chair up to the counting board. It was great. And she's just sitting there, and the poll supervisor comes walking by. Here's a stack of ballots. And Penny just points to the whole stack and says, I'm challenging this whole stack. She filled these out, this poll worker filled these out all on her own. And what could the poll supervisor say? She's like, yes, we'll redo them. So it's kind of disturbing because this was going on quite a few places, and we even saw a poll supervisor filling out ballots on their own. So that was one of the things, that was probably one of the most disturbing things that we found. We also found that many of the voting machines were left open. We would have to report it, and then they would come, make the poll workers lock it up. But, within minutes, it was left open again. Another thing that we kind of wondered about there's vans that are driving in bins of ballots in the back of Cobo Hall, and they just come out and they distribute these bins. A single driver coming from the clerk's office, we hope. We don't know where they're coming from. And there's no way to check this. I mean, the whole system is so open-ended that I think that's what's so frightening. So Janice and I are talking about this. And, she has ideas on how to tighten this up. I have ideas on how to tighten this up. I'm with the Michigan Trump Republicans, and we're going around the state doing these Women for Trump luncheons where we're getting 50 to 200 women. And besides giving them several things that they can do to help for the 2020 election, I'm asking them to sign up to be poll challengers. And I'm trying to organize 300 just for Cobo Hall, because there's 150 counting boards or counting stations that covers 460 precincts. And so I'm looking to just put 2 at every precinct. 150 times 2, 300. I'd also like to send them to Flint, Southfield, and Pontiac. If you're interested in helping with this effort, please see me afterwards. You could email me that you're interested, marion@sheridan-net.us. And those are my thoughts on it. It's my story. So, Janice?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so proud of Marion. She is a real patriot's patriot. Oh, she's lovely.
I just have to tell you this. So this is what these people in 2016, they told me, because I wasn't there in 2016, when they walked into Cobo Hall and this is what they saw, their knees weakened. They were overwhelmed with what they saw and what was in front of them. But I really firmly feel that because of their sacrifice, that they very much could have saved 10,000 votes out of that 60,000 coming in.
I'll be quick. I've done this task, and imagine it's 10 o'clock and additional ballots are being delivered.
Yes. This is just a diagram. This is how many counting stations there are. I mean, it's like mind-boggling when you walk in and see this room. So with that, here's Janice.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Marion. Great work, great work. I know that I'm going to be at Cobo Hall on Tuesday, November the 3rd, 2020, for the next presidential election to help Marion Sheridan do her poll watching. And I think if we're all really serious about recovering Michigan, we all have to take a close look at what we can do on an individual basis. I think that if we're going to get to a place where we have free and fair elections once again, we need to know what we want to see as our end result. So my presentation is called Dream Big. I should have a slide that should pop up right when I say that. Oh, is this my, oh, okay. And I just went it this way. And, okay. All right, technology. Anyway, I have written 3 articles on election fraud, and they can be found at mcu.today. I'm very concerned. This is a 7-minute presentation on an issue that is going to require weeks and weeks of study and attention to. But my first part of the series is called Shaping the Narrative, and I thought the gentleman Craig, who was up here, clearly showed us what shaping the narrative looks like. Follow the money. Look at what they do to affect people's opinions of politicians, whether they're talking about the truth or not. I think that we can see an exponential rise in the amount of opposition marketing that we see happening on a daily basis, but by the same token, I think that we have exponentially increased our knowledge, our understanding, our motivation, and our tools that we can use to counter the opposition research that affects our ability to understand the issues and the people who are voting for. My second series is called Sanctuary Madness. The one thing that I want to point out, if we're going to dream big about where we want to be when we finally end up getting free and fair elections again, if you don't show your ID, you don't vote. Period. End of conversation. There's nothing else that needs to be said about that. But in my article on Sanctuary Madness, I point out there's 563 sanctuary jurisdictions in the United States. And that means that there's 564 counties or townships or cities that are flouting federal immigration laws. In fact, California passed a law that illegal immigrants could get driver's licenses. A couple years later, they passed a law that said that anybody that has a driver's license is automatically registered to vote. So guess what? Our elections are being distorted by illegal immigrants voting. I say a sanctuary jurisdiction, the voters that come out of a sanctuary jurisdiction, their votes shouldn't even count in our elections, period. End of story. My third concern is who gets the ID, and that's kind of where I'm going to with the sanctuary jurisdiction. We shot ourselves in the foot, by the way, on November, November 8th of 2018 by passing Proposal 2 and 3, if not 1 as well. But Proposal 3 gives same-day voter registration. You can get an absentee ballot up to 40 days prior to the election for no reason at all. We need to tighten up. We need to only have paper ballots. Our electronic voting machines are just so fraught with potentialities for fraud. I'm not saying I have any conspiratorial knowledge, but think of it. You know, your cell phone, you used to have to say, okay, I'll accept an update. And you'd get an opportunity to read the privacy rules before you would have to have this update uploaded onto your phone. Now it just happens automatically. Who's to say that there aren't automatic updates that are installed into our election machines the day before voting? There's no way to check it. Paper ballots is truly the only way that we can be assured that we have one vote for one legal citizen of the United States of America. And if it takes 2 weeks to count to see who ends up winning the election, I don't care. I'd rather wait 2 weeks and know that we've got a valid and free and fair election. There should only be 1 day for voting. The first Tuesday of November is the day we vote, period. No outside voting. We don't get to vote 30 days in advance. The only reason that there should be absentee ballots is for legal, medical, or occupational situations where people absolutely cannot come to the polling place on the day of election. If the polls have to stay open from 12 midnight until 11:59 p.m. that day. If we vote all day around the clock, that's fine with me. There's no reason why we have to have all these expanded opportunities for fraud. It just doesn't make sense. Quite frankly, I'm dreaming big. I don't trust the county clerks. I don't trust the county commissioners. I don't trust the election boards. I don't trust the qualified voter files that they create. You know, you go in to vote absentee, and you are at the mercy of the county clerk as to whether your ballot is really going to be counted. Or let's say, for example, the county clerk is partisan, like all of us are, and they say, I want 1,500 of my friends to vote absentee, but I'm not going to include them on the qualified voter list. So then my 1,500 friends can go vote on election day. That's wrong. There's so much potentiality for fraud that we have to start taking control of our elections. And I would encourage everyone to poll watch with Marion Sheridan. I would love to see all of you go to your bosses today, a year in advance, a year and a half in advance, and say, you know what, I'm taking Tuesday, November the 3rd off in the year 2020. We can all be there. We can all do that. I know I'm going to be there, and that's one way that we can start to show that we care about our elections. We care about what happens in our country. I just want to mention there's a bill going around the Senate right now at the federal level, H.R. 1 for the People Act of 2019. They always have these nice names for them, but it has to be stopped by the people. This is a 704-page bill that will federalize elections at all levels across this country. It has 10,001 sections. The 10,001 first section is that any presidential or vice presidential candidate has to submit 10 years of their tax returns to the Treasury Department, who will then review it and then give the information to the public as he or she deems necessary. That's wrong. If I remember correctly, the Constitution says a person has to be 35 years old and a citizen of the United States to be president. That's it. That's it. Now, another thing that I would like to say is if you want to stay free, we have got to have ballot integrity, period. Now, we do have a rally coming up in next weekend, Sunday, May 5th, 2 to 5. This is the annual rally outside of the NAACP's dinner. The NAACP ought to be totally opposed to abortion because it's bordering on black genocide. The black community should be totally pro-life. And we need to help them understand that. So every year, we march out there with our signs and our pictures, and we protest outside the NAACP fundraising dinner. And it's interesting because the newspaper trucks are all along, and they absolutely will not turn their cameras onto us. We've even gone up and approached the trucks. We've got pictures of our activists trying to follow the trucks, and they just won't pay any attention to us. One of these days, they're going to see us. And we'll be there every year to make sure that they do. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tom McMillan. I'm on the State Board of Education and former state representative. I will make this real quick. I'm out of time already, and I just started. But on the state board, a couple things that we're working on right now. We have it's a 6-2 minority right now. Just Nikki Snyder and I are the two Republicans. We're going through a state superintendent search, and so there's narrowed down to 3. There are 3 pretty not very conservative candidates, but you know, we'll see what happens. The big thing right now that people could be doing is the social studies standards are out for public comment. And this process was extremely flawed. If you remember, Pat Colbeck and some others were helping because initially the standards a few years ago came out, and what's that liberal group that endorsed them? Yeah, the Southern Poverty Law Center endorsed those standards, and they were hard left. So Patrick Colbeck and others said these are really bad. So, then Brian Whiston, the state superintendent, said, well, let's bring it back. Out of the 100 people or so on the deciding the standards, we'll put Patrick Colbeck and Judge Michael Warren and a couple others. I think David Coleman was actually on that board, or on the group. And so that came out. And they were relatively politically neutral as best as possible. Well, the left freaked out last year, if you remember, and said that they're horrible. So they went back and they jerry-rigged the whole process this last time. So the Judge Warren was the only one that's a conservative. He's Oakland County Circuit Court. He's more of a constitutionalist, but he has an 11-page document that clearly says even his, and he was the only one of the 135 that actually were conservative or constitutionalists. And he said the process, they wrangled over, they put us in silos. They put him in silos, so he was just in civics, not history or economics or any of that. And even his group wrangled over language a lot and came to some consensus. And then the chairman of that group just threw everything out and decided, no, we're not going to implement what Judge Warren wanted. So they ended, and they did what they wanted to do. So it's hard left. If you Google, I don't want to give you a website, but if you Google Michigan Social Studies Standards Online Survey, if you Google that, you'll get the page. You can, it's a link. It's only a few questions. And they give you an opportunity for general comments. I would just say the process was clearly rigged against any kind of conservatives. And also I'd say in the comments section that, these people want public support for more money for public education, government schools. This is who wants to fund this kind of garbage? I keep telling my Democrat colleagues, you guys want more money and you're going to do this? I mean, public support is going to continue to dwindle. People are going to continue to pull their kids out of school if you keep doing this. So I think those kind of comments are helpful, and we're in a process right now where we need you to do that. Also, they're having listen sessions around the state right now. Monday, this coming Monday at Oakland County, next Thursday in Lansing, a week from Monday in Grand Rapids, and then Tuesday through Thursday, the 7th through the 9th is up in Gaylord in the UP. So that's the action that needs to be done now. We all say, can you believe, how are these people, these young kids, pushing socialism and grasping for socialism? Well, here's your time to make that impact. Is the next week or two when there's public comment. And, it's their social studies standards that they don't have hardly anything that's conservative. They talk about the Cold War, but they don't say that they have to mention Ronald Reagan and Gorbachev in the standards. I mean, there's tons of things that Michael Warren has given comments and given examples for. So it's clearly left-wing, and it's extremely biased. And I would urge you to do that over the next week or two. Make sure and get others to do it as well. Well, I would just Google. It's on the Michigan Department of Education website. And if you Google, Michigan Social Studies Standards Online Survey, you'll go right to the page. But that's how you get to it. And it's a quick link that there's a couple of paragraphs you have to press go to online survey, and then you'll go and fill it out. Right. Yeah.
And vice president and founder had to resign under sexual assault.
No, I know, but they haven't weighed in on the current ones, on these proposed. That was two generation. That was about 4 years ago. All right.
There's a flyer over here on the MICPAC table for anybody who's interested in following up on the
Right.
information about
And there's one on work keys, and I hope you come to the session that's going to be here in a few minutes, where you can hear more and ask questions then. We're going to have all kind of questions and answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Patriots. Jim Hafman, just a quick thing. Could we, am I set there, Alec? Terry McCormick, Dr. Terry McCormick is from Green Bay, Wisconsin, De Pere, that area. She had put together with a group of individuals prediction software and algorithm and stuff like that, and had accurately predicted that Donald Trump would win the election in 2016. So she is going to be at the MICPAC We hope. Her sister is going under breast cancer surgery, so she wasn't able to make it. But I wanted to put in a little plug for her while we were here. Am I doing this the wrong way? Okay, her political intelligence platform technology will help connect citizens around the nation and the globe by visiting the website. It actually, right now, they do have a thing with the algorithm. It has Twitter accounts and things like that being fed into it, and it weighs them for positive and negative against whoever. You could type in like POTUS or whatever, and that would take care of you. Anyway, situational awareness. One of the things that we probably need to be constantly aware of in this day and age, we do have security personnel here today who are armed, which is a very unfortunate need. But that's the way things are in this day and age. So, when you came in, do you know how to get out of here? One of the problems that we have in emergency evacuations is everybody wants to leave out the same door they came in. So be aware of that. Find out an alternative exit just in case something hits the fan. Fire alarm. Anybody know where those are? Right? Okay, left and right going out the doors there. Well, then we have fire extinguishers. That way, that way. And all we kind of do is just want to be aware. We don't need to be paranoid, just factually aware. One of the things that we should do is be careful. We have armed security in churches these days. Anything can go bad just about any place at any time. We have the school shootings, malls, theaters. At home you have break-ins and things like that. Your car, and on the street, and even in arenas. Familiarize yourself with the environment that you're going to be going into. Talk to your coworkers about any pre-planned response. If you have a working environment and something bad goes down, you should have a plan in place to handle it. Retreat areas, codes, lockdown, whatever the case you need. Keep your emergency supplies in every room, first aid kit, things along that line, maybe even some food and water if necessary. Identify ways to lock or barricade your area. LAPD has a real good video on it. You can go to YouTube and look at LAPD for active shooter. It would be an excellent training session for anybody that has a work environment. I would play that. Practice your drills. And again, Los Angeles Sheriff's Department.org, active shooting, HTML. That's probably the best place to get it. Okay, as far as your active shooters go, everybody been trained in that? Pretty much. You have some familiarization anyway. Run, get the hell out of there is one of the best things to do. But if you're going to be going into the face of it, then you're going to have to probably find a place to hide, retreat to shelter. And designate a safe room in your work environment. At home, shut off your cell phones. You don't want those things ringing when somebody's coming through shooting people. Shut off the lights, lock your doors, and block the doors with anything and everything that's possible, just to keep the person from coming into your area. And as the last resort, fight. Anything that's available. You can spray them with a fire extinguisher. You can knock them in the head with it. Grab a chair. Do whatever you got to do. Fight for your life, because it could be the final moment. His or yours. Okay, now when you enter a building, just pause a little bit. Like when you come in here today, look for your fire extinguishers, alarms, exits, and things along that line. We have, as a police officer, and Norm can attest to this, we always sit facing the door. When we go into a restaurant, we come into places like this, we always try to be facing the door so we can see what's going on around us. Situational awareness, if you will. Take a look around for activities and suspicious people while you're on the street. coming out of the grocery store. Who's watching you? Anybody out there? Like I say, awareness, not paranoia. Two different things. Keep your keys at the ready. Ladies, do not throw your purses in your car to return the grocery cart. Keep it with you. Lock the doors when returning the grocery cart if you're going to be more than a couple steps away. And most times in a grocery parking lot, you are going to be more than a few steps away. Check the interior of your car before you get into it. And also develop a situational standard. What am I doing here? Okay, like I say, we usually, law enforcement will always sit facing the entrance to maintain some vigilance. Sit near an exit, envision your escape plan, keep your head on a swivel while you're in public. Scan your surroundings using the primary senses. You listen, you can smell, you can hear, you can feel, because sometimes you can even taste. I've been on patrol at nights where I could taste something, and sure enough, there was something to foul. Back up to the wall before checking your text messages, just so you don't have yourself obstructed where somebody can get you from behind. Don't post your vacation plans in social media. Matter of fact, if you belong to Facebook or Twitter, dump them. And by the way, Google, no, don't Google, duckduckgo.com. That way you're not tracked. Google, they know everything about you. Alexa, too. Be vigilant while using your ATM machines. Cover your PIN. They do have little things, like little cameras, that'll not only take your card information, but will also, they can videotape you entering your PIN. So be aware of that. Check for the skimmers on the lower right side. When you go into gas stations, just look to see that there's nothing there. And where they ask for your PIN, look around for those little cameras. Normal ATM will be on the left. You'll see the arrows pointing up. And then your skimmer on the right. Okay, protecting your credit cards, your wallet. Keep your wallet in your front pocket, if you can. If I have pockets with buttons on it, so those work pretty good. Have your credit cards placed close to each other. Take a look around before you pull out your ATM. Buy and use an RFID wallet sleeve. Those are those little metal things. You can't put much into them. So you can put a jammer in, but probably the best thing you do is just put a layer of tinfoil in your wallet. That's what I do, just a little sheet of tinfoil. That's kind of like, you have those cards that are going in and out of Michigan and Canada, kind of our passport cards. Those are kind of in a protected sleeve, so you can put your credit cards inside, away from the outside access. My wife had her ATM card compromised, and the only thing we could figure is somebody must have scammed her purse and got the information, because she doesn't use it otherwise, just a grocery store. So tinfoil inside the hat, or inside the wallet, not on the head. Also, too many distractions, be aware. And in the world is in a transition phase. Remember how we used to capture our memories. Little lady, the only one without a cell phone, taking a picture. And then finally, you have task saturation, where you're too busy involved with your tasks and you're not paying attention to the situation around you. Bad things can happen. Thank you. And great chow, by the way. Thank you for the chow prep. That was excellent. And thank you, Norm, for your hospitality and everything. Good to see everybody. Thank you. Thanks. Yes, sir. Thank you.
I hope you appreciate the fact that we care about your security, and I think that's very important to remember. I had a national security position with Reagan, and I don't leave my back to anybody, and so you do the same. We're not going to break into sessions, and we're running about 10 minutes late. Would you prefer we cut those short and the other presentations short, or do you want to go 10 minutes longer? Who wants to go 10 minutes longer? Raise your hands. And who wants to cut it short? Okay, well, I guess the majority has that we're going forward. The panels that are, the education panel is going to be right here. It's going to be Bruce Barland, who's going to be the MC, Tom McMillan, David Coleman, and Melanie Curtis. The energy panel, Jay Taylor is going to moderate that. We've got Mr. Maury and Mr. Anderson that spoke earlier, myself and Angie Kolbeck that are going to run that panel. That's in the what we call the Reagan room. We got to go, I guess, out this door and into another building. You can follow us. And then the third panel is going to be the group organization and growth panel. That's going to be across the parking lot in the lower level of the basement. That's going to be Linda Wildern and Mary Sears and John Danielle, Jerry Allen, Randy Bishop, Shane Trejo, and others. So you can gather by this door and walk over together. We'll be back here in an hour, okay?
Okay. This is a panel on education. As they speak, our speakers are going to introduce themselves. Well, we have Tom McMillan here on the right, Melanie Curtis, Dave Kalman, and Mike Swope, and myself. Now, I had a few notes here that I was going to go through to kind of, you know, give my side of the perspective. But let me just say a couple things. The reason I'm so interested in education is because of how far education has fallen in the last 60 years. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous. And the way this came to my mind is when I was a student at Western Michigan University. I went there because my mother or grandmother had taught for over 30 years at Homer Schools, and before that in a one-room schoolhouse for years. I started school in a one-room schoolhouse. And I know, you know, that was only 20 years ago, but anyway, I started. But when I went to Western, I went to become a teacher like my grandmother. I took all my required classes the first year and a half or 2 years or whatever it was, and then went to do my orientation class. There was about 400 of us in this classroom. And a quote from the speaker in that classroom said it all for me. He said, "I'm going to teach you what to think." And I said to myself, Bruce, this ain't for me. And so since then, I've been keeping, went into a different major, graduated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Married a great woman, and anyway, just, it's been spectacular. So, right now, what was about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, the U.S. ranked something like 17th in math and all those others, compared to the world. In 2017, in math, we were 39th in the world. 25th, let's see, reading, we were 24th, and science, 25th in the world. Now, we've got to save our country. Our kids and grandkids are depending on us to turn this thing around. And towards the end of this, I would like you to think seriously about coming very involved in your local communities to turn your local communities around so that the state and even the federal government can start turning around, because we need your help. So, thank you. And we'll start off here with Tom McMillan.
Okay, well, we don't have a whole lot of time, so I'm going to go quickly. I got about 7 minutes, I think, for each of us, and then we want to leave a lot of question and answer time. That's the main thing we want to do. So I will actually tell you that those statistics actually, to me, are not that important, and that's going to shock a lot of people. I also am going to say that I differ significantly on education with the Mackinac Center. So let me tell you why. I used to be into high-stakes testing. I was a president of a state or of a charter school. We always knew all the about high-stakes testing, and if a teacher didn't raise a kid or raise the class a certain level, then they were fired. Very high stakes. That was at the local level, which isn't as bad. But what I want to argue is the conservative principle is local control. It's the teacher and the parent at the classroom that knows what's best for the student. It's not the state. And what has happened is conservatives have decided that we are more concerned about high-stakes testing at the state level, and we want to impose it down with state law. And I've fought them, and I've been on the losing end. Betsy DeVos and others have highly financed my, to do it centralized. So let me tell you, things turned around for me on high-stakes testing in one hearing. It started. Back when I was a freshman in education committee, there was Young Zhao, and he's an excellent guy. He was an MSU professor at the time, ZHOA, I believe, or AO, Zhao, AO. And he was presenting at the Education Committee. The Democrats were in charge. And he said one sentence. He was an expert on Chinese education as well as American. He said, in China, they will graduate 6 times as many engineers than the United States. And he said they will be excellent on international tests, on all kinds of exams. They're incredible with calculations. He said, but almost none of them can create a thing. And I thought, wow, that one idea just started turning me a ship in my mind around. And what it does is when you're focused on these tests, it kills creativity. There's a great TED talk by Sir Ken Robinson about education kills creativity, or the way we're doing it now. And so what we have done is elevated these international tests, and we've never been good. The U.S. has never been good on international tests, but that's one of the benefits, is that we haven't been so focused on teaching to the test and doing well on these things. We've actually allowed kids, we have a decentralized, or we've had a decentralized education system of local control, which has fostered or has killed creativity less successfully than the other countries, as Young Zhao says. So this is why I oppose high-stakes testing. For example, they are going to now, starting this year because of Republicans, grade schools A to F on the MEP, the M-STEP state exam. Well, the M-STEP is aligned to Common Core. I mean, the standard, you test the standards. So now, because of Republicans, the schools, if they want to do better, if they're at a C and they want to get to a B, they've got to be more faithful at Common Core, which is developmentally inappropriate, harms kids. And so, I don't want that. I want it to be, look, back in the days, we had a state test maybe, but it wasn't used for something that it wasn't supposed to be, for grading. And then there was also grading schools, and you can see it. When they're a C, the whole school is going to have pep rallies about how we need to get to a B, and that's all the focus. It's not about what little Susie needs right now. The teacher can't, if they're focused on that, and the state support or passed, I fought it and stopped it for a few years in my life, are interested in teachers, and the teachers want autonomy. They want to be free. They didn't go into teaching to be told, this is what you've got to do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and this is how you're going to teach it. And if you don't teach it faithfully, you're going to get fired. and be high-stakes testing. They wanted to bring passion and bring ability to impact Susie and Jimmy and what they need. And they may be developing at a slower pace or a faster pace. Well, but you can't do these things when it's all about the test. And so I could talk about a swath of things. I wanted to get done pretty quickly, but I really wanted to kind of jolt you because I think Republicans and conservatives think accountability. These teachers, and they are not just sitting around. Now, there's going to be some that are not that great. There's no doubt, but there always has been. But we've created a system that is systemically going to turn out. They may do well on some international exam, but they won't have an idea about being creative and being, what freedom and what liberty, what has made this country great. We're becoming more like China. That's what some of the leaders have said. We got to be more like China. China's trying to get away from standardized testing, but because of their society is very top down, they can't. I mean, Yang Zhao said it's a society that won't be creative because their society kills it. So they want to be less high stakes, but their society won't. We have a society that fosters creativity, but we're killing it. We're killing it through high stake testing. So anyway, I look forward to maybe trying to tantalize you to ask some questions in the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, David Coleman.
Thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon with you. I thank you for inviting me to participate in the NORM and the Michigan Conservative Union. My name is Dave Collin, and I'm an attorney here in Lansing, and have been in practice now for, I know I don't look this old, but about 38 years. And I just kind of fell into education law as a part of our practice. My dad was a circuit judge and sat on the Court of Appeals by appointment a number of times, and some of you may have even supported him when he ran for Supreme Court back in the mid-'80s, and he was one of the Republican nominees for Supreme Court. And he was telling me one day about homeschooling. I was just a new lawyer, 6 months out, and trying to get a client, kind of a thing. He said, you better find out about homeschooling, because I bet you get asked questions. And so like any good son, in one ear, out the other, didn't think anything about it. And it wasn't a week or two later that I had a call from a local pastor saying, I have some parents in my church, I think they're breaking the law, they're homeschooling. Do you know anything about it? I said, oh, sure, Pastor, have him come on down. I didn't know anything. And so I got some information from the Department of Ed, which probably wasn't the best place back at that time, but then started doing some research and met with these folks. One thing led to another. There was a homeschool conference in the Detroit area I went to, I thought incognito. I got recognized and was there. And next thing I knew, I was being asked to speak at their next conference, and all of a sudden I'm an expert. So it was really kind of interesting. But we've been fortunate to be involved in many cases in home education. Many of you might recall the DeYoung case, which we won in the Michigan Supreme Court back now 25 years ago, 1993, which threw out the requirement for teacher certification. And then other cases, when I was in law school, probably one of the most famous cases in Michigan for home education was the Noble family. Peter and Ruth Noble, in fact, their daughter's here. I don't know if she's still in here right now, but she's here today. And John Whitehead handled that case. There have been many cases. Homeschooling in Michigan was really, really hard to do back in the 80s and into the mid-90s, and now we're one of the easiest states to homeschool in. So that was kind of my introduction into this area. And then over the years, I've gotten involved in charter schools, private Christian schools.
I need to interrupt for just
Yeah, sure.
Okay, there's a car that needs to be moved, a truck, a GMC Terrain, dark gray. License number at the end is 7714. It needs to get moved immediately, if not sooner. 7714, dark gray GMC Terrain.
Might be the other two buildings. The other two buildings.
It's been very nice seeing you folks. Oh, I'm sorry. This is not mine. But we got involved in charter schools. In fact, our firm, myself, we were the first attorneys to get the first charter school chartered in Michigan when the law was first passed back in the early 90s. I've worked with many, many private schools, Michigan Association of Christian Schools. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that organization. So been very involved in these areas, had a number of cases over the years. Some of you may have heard of Great Lakes Justice Center. Professor Wagner, who I'm sure you heard earlier here, and I started that legal defense organization about 5 years ago now. And we've been involved in cases from the U.S. Supreme Court all the way down to local township issues. And we filed briefs in the Masterpiece Cake case, you know, over the cake baker out west, those kinds of things. We filed many briefs in appellate courts and in the Supreme Court. We've been involved in litigation. Right now, we have a lawsuit pending in Western Michigan District Court against the Williamston Public School District, my alma mater. I'm suing my alma mater over the transgender bathroom issues and policies and things like that. So that case is pending over in Grand Rapids right now. In fact, we're meeting with some people this week from Saline who are coming in because of some things they're doing in curriculum. So we've been very involved in all of these sorts of issues. Some of the other, you may have heard of the Planet Fitness case, where the lady was kicked out of Planet Fitness up in Midland because she objected to a man being in the women's locker room when she was done working out. That's our case, where we just won in the Supreme Court a couple weeks ago on that case, and so now it's going back for trial, finally, after 2.5 years of fighting in the appellate courts. So we just won in the Supreme Court on that. So we've been very involved in the education field and things that are going on. Tom mentioned the social studies group. I was involved in that at Pat Colbeck's request. Senator Colbeck asked me to be involved. And that process was fine that we went through. Many changes were made, but as Tom said, they all got thrown out later, and it's just been totally ignored. Judge Warren has done a really good job to list, you know, all the concerns and problems with that. So honestly, it's getting to a stage with the public schools where you really have to wonder how much longer can we keep sending our kids to this system, honestly. And there's so many other options now with charter schools or homeschool, private schools, things like that. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't have people involved as teachers and administrators and all those things and try to have impact. Of course we should. But it's getting to a pretty critical point. And I think the social studies standards thing is just one more example of how we're not welcome in that system, because we are not going to be listened to, and they put on a good front, but when it comes right down to it, they don't want your input, they don't want my input. That's the bottom line. So that's my background and involvement. We're doing a lot legally. If you want to see more about Great Lakes Justice Center, you can go to our website. It's greatlakesjc.org, greatlakesjc.org, and you can see some of the things we have going on there. We get involved in a lot of right-to-life issues. We were just testifying this week, William and I, at some Senate and House hearings dealing with some of the abortion bills that are pending right now, the dismemberment bill and some things like that. So check us out, and you can keep up to date and see what's going on. But it's great to be here today. I hope I can answer any questions that might come up along the legal angles, and be glad to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, David. By the way, you should have some of these cards on your table. Write your questions down, put your name on if you like. You don't have to put your name on it, but write down any questions you have. We want to answer lots of questions, so please do so. Okay, our next speaker is Melanie Curtis.
Hi.
Thank you very much. By way of introduction, I think most of you know me as the one of the co-founders of Stop Common Core in Michigan, and now I'm the Michigan president of the U.S. Parents Involved in Education. If you want to know more about that, we've got flyers over there. I want to say I agree with Tom McMillan that high-stakes testing is a bad idea, and we still need to get rid of Common Core in Michigan. Michigan public school kids are not learning how to read, write, and do math. High-stakes testing doesn't fix that. But we do need to teach kids how to read, write, and do math. In 2007, 75% of our third graders could read. I thought that was an embarrassing number. In 2018, it's 44%. That is child abuse. Yes, and the system is collecting intimate data about children, feeding into the workforce development system. So what are kids learning instead of reading, writing, and arithmetic? They're learning gender and sexual orientation. We watch legislation across the country because things that start usually out west end up in Michigan. Colorado has a new law that teaches gender morphing sex ed in preschool as part of the Colorado Youth Wellness Act. That's just one example. In Oregon, they have their sex ed books have pictures and details about alternate sexual activities. So those are embarrassing and they're disgusting. Atheism and human secularism and Islam are taught in the schools. Access Islam is a program on Islam that is provided by the federal government under Donald Trump and Betsy DeVos still for schools to use to learn about peaceful Islam. But Judeo-Christian values have no place in the public arena. Politically correct activism is good. That's what these new social studies standards do. They teach kids K-12 to be political activists. But patriotism is bad. They do not teach children to be proud of their country and to think of themselves as common citizens of the country first, and perhaps a subgroup second. They used an overlying 7 biases evaluation, and the number one criteria of the 7 biases of curriculum is all groups must be represented. Now just take for a moment, you think, you're going to teach the founding of our country. Well, the founding of our country was by a bunch of Christian white men. How are you going to tell a story that has women and black people and American Indians in that story? So instead, they just cut that story short and find some other topic to add to teach instead. Social and emotional learning is becoming more important than knowledge. This is more than just how do you feel. It's SEL. I encourage you to look up more information about social emotional learning. But it is really damaging our children. And computers make better teachers than people. Many of our schools have gone to one-to-one computing. Every student has an iPad. Students are encouraged to use those computers instead of books. Teachers are encouraged to use those computers instead of conducting lectures or lessons. And really importantly, they're teaching that parents are stupid and they deny children the right to find their real self. Just as an example, in Ohio, there's a parental rights were nullified because the parents of a 17-year-old girl did not agree to her transitioning to a male. And in Oregon, they passed a law that allows 15-year-olds to get puberty-suppressing drugs and sex change operations without parental permission. So what can you do? Well, I, for one, believe public schools are on a suicide mission. But if you want to help in public schools, there are some good things happening. Tom McMillan is one example. Tecumseh School Board last November turned over their entire board 2 people were up for election. They were booted out. Everybody else was recalled. They got a brand new board. Within a month, they fired their superintendent, and they are on a roll. We are really hoping that they're going to be able to get things done. Got our fingers crossed. In Allendale, the parents are taking the sex education curriculum bull by the horns, working really hard. So if you want to help public schools, run for your local school board, get like-minded parents on the board, and prepare to fight. But if you want to save your children, save your grandchildren, save your neighbors' children, get them out. Get them out now. Homeschool. Not homeschool where it's online public homeschooling. Nothing that has anything to do with government money. Even charter schools are as bad as the regular public schools in terms of what I have articulated, because those are what's coming down as the requirements. So private schools, but even some of our Christian and Catholic schools have adopted Common Core, so you have to look carefully. Get them out, put them someplace safe. There's a really good book, They're Your Kids, by Mrs. Sam Sorbo on homeschooling, her transition. It's a great story if you have a young mother who's worried about her ability to homeschool. Very, very self-affirming. And I want to thank you, David, for all you've done for the homeschool arena. I know if we hadn't had that transition in the 90s to the law, we would be way behind the 8 ball. So it's a good choice now. And then join the movement, uspie.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Mike Swope.
Thank you, everyone. Let's see what they have to say. Yeah. Close enough. I'm Professor Mike Swope. I teach at 2 colleges that will remain unnamed for the sake of my career. Throw in, so I will try to keep my comments brief. There are many problems in education, and my 3 predecessors up here on the panel have addressed several of those. I want to also offer some other observations as someone who is actually in education. One of the major problems that I believe that we have in American education is that we have an increasing number of educators who have never done anything else ever in their life. They've been in school since they've been 4 years old. So they go through elementary school, middle school, junior high, high school, go on to college, get a bachelor's degree, go on, they get the graduate degree, and then when they get the graduate degree, they flip sides of the desk, and then they start teaching or administering, and they don't spend much time outside, never holding a career job where they have to hang on to it, where they have to live in the conditions of the real world. So they might work part-time through college, but those are jobs that they're going to hold for a few weeks and then let go of. And it worries me as someone who has a dramatic amount of outside experience. Even though I've been teaching for a good long time, I've also run a multi-million-dollar retail company. I've been in politics for a very long time. I've been a reporter. I've been an editor. I've been a service manager at a garage. I've done several other things. And so because of that, I'm going to have different perspectives. My beliefs have had to be tested in the real world. When I was running a multi-million-dollar company, I was successful. Why can I say I was successful? It's not because I believed I was successful, but because I can point at the bottom line, and I can point at a 79% increase in profits. I didn't decide I was successful. My customers did. They voted with their dollars, and they said I was doing the right things. I was making the right decisions. I was stocking the right products. I was teaching my staff how to serve them in a way that they liked. Where in education, educators do get to define the standards of their own success. And there's many ways in which education as an industry is different from other industries. So take, for example, at both of the schools I teach at, I'm unionized, and under the contract, it is prohibited for my dean to come into my classroom and watch me teach, or even to stand outside the classroom and listen without my permission. Now, tell me what other industry you know of where it's prohibited from a boss to know how the worker's working. And there's another thought that I want to offer, and again, because I'm going to throw in, I'm going to try to just be brief. But it was something that Melanie and I were talking about earlier. We have the same system in terms of the actual system that won 2 world wars, that sent Americans to the moon and returned them safely to the earth. We have the same system that has built nuclear power plants, the same system that has educated people to send robots past planets far, far away. We have that same system. That system is not working now. So is the problem the system, or is the problem the people in it? And that's one of the reasons why I offer that. I remember when I was in K-12 and also when I was in college, nearly every teacher that I had done something outside of school, something substantial. My professors at college, most of them, some were World War II veterans, some were Korean, Vietnam War veterans. Some had actually been in business, some had, they'd been in media, but they'd been outside school and then they had taught. And in K-12, a lot of my teachers there, they'd taught for a long time, but they'd done something else. They had, worked for several years, maybe as wait staff, or done something else, but they hadn't been in school all their lives. So I think we've got a good system, but we need to get back to where we have people who know how to teach it and don't want to corrupt it. And that's one of the problems that we have, is that on our side, philosophically, we're behind the 8 ball because the other side has a huge advantage. And they also, let's face it, they're also teaching and preaching things that are easy to believe. It's easy to believe in a utopia. Going back to a couple of the talks from this morning, it's easier to believe in a utopia than it is to believe in a rough and tumble world. The trouble is that we live in a rough and tumble world, not a utopia. And if you remember what Professor Verizor was saying about socialism and collectivism, I can attack it even more directly. And a lot of my students go white-faced when they hear me say this in classes. The reason why socialism and collectivism is not desirable is because it can't work. Collectivism requires, and socialism, Marxism, whatever, communism, whatever you want to call it, its goal is equality of outcome. Why can't that work? Because it's unnatural. None of us are equal in terms of what we produce. Professor Thomas Sowell has a great quote, if you cannot get equal results from 2 children within the same family, how do you expect equal results coming out of an entire society? We are all different in our interests, in our capabilities, in our ambitions, and those even change over time. I'm going to be 57 in about 6 weeks, and the 57-year-old me has much different ambitions than the 27-year-old me had. It's a different outlook on life. I have that much more experience, that many more successes, that many more defeats. But also there's different things that I want to do. And that's just within one lifetime. We're all that way. Each one of us is different. So the natural outcome is inequality. The natural outcome is disparity. Because we all do different things. We don't do everything similarly. And even those of us who do the same things do them differently. I'm just teaching is one of those examples. I've had arguments with an administrator this week that I was hoping to get wrapped up, but I may be calling Mr. Coleman here this week if that doesn't resolve itself. I teach a different way than my colleagues teach, and part of that is because of my interests, but also because of my experience. And that's life experience as well as education and everything else. Inequality is the natural outcome of life. None of us do things the same way, exactly. None of us want to do things the same way. So therefore, why would you expect people across society to end up with exactly the same things? Socialism, collectivism, communism, it's unnatural. And the only way that you can make it happen is through artifice. And what is the one agency in society that has the artifice to make that happen? To force people to give up some of what they have to give to people who haven't earned it. Now, that agency is the state. And when you put it that starkly for students, then you see all of a sudden, oh my gosh, he's right. Maybe socialism isn't such a good thing after all. But that's part of what, if you have a good teacher, that's part of what happens, that sometimes you get hit upside the head with reality, and then you can benefit from that. But generally, the worst educators, the worst colleagues I have are colleagues who've been in school all their lives. The best colleagues I've had are people who've done something outside and they teach as well, or they've done something and then they've come to teach. So I want to offer that just as a suggestion that for everybody at all levels of education, that I think is one of the more immediate solutions. Quit hiring and promoting educators who haven't done anything else. And I think we will see some results that would benefit all of us in society. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you, Mike. Okay, a question for Melanie. Please repeat name and author of the book you cited. Oh, I'll give you that.
They're Your Kids, Mrs. Sam Sorbo, S-O-R-B-O.
Okay, to whoever wants to answer this question, are social promotions still permitted now that schools must teach standards, or are kids required to meet the standards to progress to the next grade?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I don't think we want state law dictating anything, quite frankly. So, I mean, if your school is doing social promotion and you think little Susie, your daughter or whatever, shouldn't be promoted, then we should handle it at a local, at a teacher level, at a school level. But I mean, yeah, I guess they can be promoted. We've got 12th graders graduating who can't read. So yes, obviously it's being done, but the standards, some of the standards are very inappropriate. I mean, some of them are developmentally inappropriate. So I hope it is going on to some degree. I hope that they are saying, if I force this standard on this child, it's going to harm them. Young Zhao says you could teach anybody to read at a certain age, 3rd grade, 2nd grade. They may hate reading for the rest of their life. That's the outcome. So, I would say that hopefully the more local, I don't know, you want to?
Yeah. Well, I agree. I mean, the point was we don't have laws against it, although next year it looks like we're going to have the law that forces 3rd graders to fail if they can't read at grade level. And considering that means only 44%, not counting the loopholes, of students will move on to 4th grade, that's kind of going to be pretty disruptive in the schools. So, right, Common Core level 3rd grade reading.
Yes, social promotion does happen. Detroit Public Schools has a 2-tier diploma where if you actually academically graduate, you do have an endorsement on your diploma, and if you've just gotten the social promotion thing and you haven't met the academic qualifications, you get a separate type of diploma, but you get a diploma either way. It also happens in higher education, but it happens a little more perniciously because in higher education, what will happen is that if you have a student who is on the margin of not passing and that student goes to the dean to try to get some sort of exception or dispensation, the dean will, and this especially works for those of us who are adjuncts because many of us are at-will employees, so the dean will come and will not say you must pass that student. It will be phrased to you as you're going to retain that student, aren't you? And there's that, of course, unspoken or else. But that's the way it's done. Is that either you pass the student or else you're going to see fewer or maybe no classes in future semesters.
I don't know, maybe you have heard this before, but Highland Park had a lawsuit, I don't know if you're familiar, where the parents sued their school board and the state board of education because they were given a high school diploma and they could not read at the 8th grade level. So they were suing on breach of contract. It went all the way to the Michigan Supreme Court and they lost, because the court ruled that the Michigan Constitution it only requires that we provide public education. There is no assumption of quality.
Okay, all of these mics are supposed to be live now, so, okay, question from Mark Sosnowski. That's close enough. Substitute teacher and U.S. Taxpayer Party of Michigan candidate. Is it true we are not allowed to see the M-STEP questions, nor even the results, and why?
Yeah, it is true. It is true, and Melanie's worked a long time on this. I had legislation that would require it, but yeah, it's true. There's no, and they say, oh, because the question bank, we only have so many questions. Look, if they wanted to have, first of all, like on social studies standards, if the kids really know all the facts, thousands of them, that's not too bad, this is an area, though, that I think that if this horribly left-wing standards pass and we don't, or go through the board and pass, I think we at least demand that we see the questions, and I think that will provide an opening. So, but yeah, you're right.
And not only can the public not see them, the teachers can't see them. Students are made to sign an agreement that they will not tell anyone what they were. Third grade.
Third grade. Okay, is PARCE, P-A-R-C-E testing universal for homeschool, charter, private schools, as well as all public schools? If so, will all schools use Common Core as those tests?
Okay, there is no required standardized test in Michigan for homeschool or private schools that don't take government money. If you start taking government money, that will be one of the first things they will demand, which is a data collection and a force you to teach to the test model. So that's why you shouldn't take government money to homeschool or private school. But all public schools and all charter schools must administer the M-STEP, which is the smarter balanced version of the Common Core aligned assessment.
Yeah, remember that one of the things about taking government money is that follows the golden rule, and that is who has the gold makes the rules. So always remember that. That's the reason why Hillsdale College doesn't accept money. They don't allow their students to accept any federal money. That way they don't have any expectation of meeting any federal requirements. So yeah, do not take any government money when it comes to homeschooling at all. Because once you do, it's the camel's nose under the tent, and once the camel's nose gets under the tent, the rest of the camel follows.
Thank you, Mike. If 44% of students cannot read at third grade level by third grade, will it result in lowering the standards?
Yes. Melanie, you want to?
Yes, it will, because the way that education works is that if you don't meet the standards, you just lower them. Because remember, the educators set the standards for their own success, not the outside world directly.
Well, I would say even if it doesn't lower the standards, students are in a terrible position. It's always been a rule of thumb in education, K-3 teach to read, fourth on read to learn. I mean, and so you would have a child moving to fourth grade unable to read to learn, and the teachers aren't committed to teaching them to read anymore. So it's more likely to draw down the achievement level at a more persistent level, and then maybe they'll reduce the standards, but there's not a way right now that they will reduce them, because they are defined very, very minuscule level of standards. And so I think first it will appear in lowered achievement, and Mike might be right. Maybe over time, then they'll have to lower the standards.
But that 44% is 44% can read, and it's based on the NAEP, which is not state standards, it's the NAEP, national assessment. So yeah, and you know, but demanding them that they read by third grade has horrible consequences. What has happened, because we have a third grade reading Republicans put in, and that you're going to retain the child if they can't read at third grade, is that now districts at kindergarten, the kindergarten teacher has to make 70 observations twice a year for every child in their class. So they can't teach. They said that I'm too busy filling out paperwork because you're worried whether they're going to read in third grade. They've decided to walk it all the way back to kindergarten. So all these things have unintended consequences that are horrific when the state gets involved. I'm telling you. You know, yeah, we're back in the old days, some kids couldn't read maybe at third grade or fourth grade, but it wasn't something that was throughout the whole system with unintended consequences. I can't believe Republicans are into central planning and deciding the centralization of education. So, yeah, it's just frustrating.
Okay. Next question. Has anyone sued, now this is a good question, has anyone sued school districts for failing to teach their kids reading and math?
Well, I think we had, whoops. Well, here you go. Use this one. I think you just answered. The Highland Park case is very familiar where that happened. But, you know, you do get into the mindset of the educator. Most educators, most people are just good people trying to do a good job. But I tend to run into the others, you know, who are not trying to do a good job. That I've actually had an educator say to my face, "Parents procreate, we educate." I mean, think about the mindset behind that. I had one instance with a superintendent for a homeschool family down in the Monroe County area. Their child their senior had been in a serious car accident. They were involved in the community, on all the boards, raising money for the schools, you know, pillars of the community, right? They had 6 kids in the public schools there. Their son was in serious condition, death's door, going to the hospital. The wife finds out. Husband says, "I'll go get the kids at the elementary school, you go get the kids at the middle school." She rushes over to get the kids. Walks in, everybody knows her, says to the secretary there, "Hey, we've had a terrible accident, our son's in the hospital, I'm here to pick up Johnny and, you know, Charlie, just letting you know," and turns to walk out. Principal happens to be there, says, "Wait, you can't take the kids." And this is now like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 1:15. And she looks at her, "What do you mean I can't take the kids?" "Well, they're not done with school. You can come back and get them at 2:30. And the mother, you can imagine how she reacted to that. And said, "Well, I'm going to get them." You know, that's ridiculous. He says, "You walk out that door and start going down the hall, I'm going to have you arrested." She started walking down the hall. He had her arrested. She's at the county jail. I mean, I'll give you the short version here. They started homeschooling the next day, literally. The school decided they're going to make an example of them. So I show up for the first court hearing for a pretrial, usually just myself and a prosecutor. And I walk into this county commission room. They literally have 20 people sitting around a table. Police officers, social workers, I mean, you name it. And then the superintendent, they had 1 chair open for me. So I figured, well, this should be fun, you know. So I was a young attorney, and I didn't know any better. So I sit down, and the superintendent looks at me, and he says, "Hey, have the kids back in the school Monday morning at 8 a.m., and this will all go away." And I looked at him, and I thought, well, okay, it looks like we're going to have a trial here. So
I'll see if I can get under this guy's skin, because I knew I'd be, interrogating him in a courtroom. So I looked at him and I said, well, sir, I know you think your schools are great, but maybe if you hadn't arrested my client, we wouldn't all be sitting here today. And you could have heard a pin drop, because a lot of those people, I'm sure, didn't know that. This guy blew up, leans across the table, shakes his finger at me, and literally says, when those kids cross the schoolhouse door, they're mine. And the sooner the parents understand that, the better. And you could have heard a pin drop in this room, right? And I sit back and I smiled. I took my pad of paper and I slammed it on the table to the guy right next to me. I said, I want your name, address, and phone number. And I want this to go all around the room. Nobody leave this room till I have everybody's name, address, and phone number. And then I stood up, and the assistant prosecutor down at the end says, well, what are you talking about? Why do you need that? And I said, well, because I've just won this case. I'm going to get 6 parents from your community. I'm going to call this guy, and the first question I'm going to ask him is, did he just say what he just said? And then he looked at me, and I looked him right in the eye. I said, I know people like you. You guys lie. You'll get on the stand and you will lie, and you'll deny ever saying what you just said. But you know what? I'm bound to say there's probably some God-fearing people in this room right now. They won't lie. I want my witness list. And I stood up and I said to the prosecutor, if I don't have it, I'm going to go across and get the judge. I want everybody's name, address, and phone number. Nobody ever better leave this room till I have it. And I said, thank you. This is a very interesting meeting. And I walked out. Prosecutor came out 5 minutes later, nothing on my pad of paper. And I started to get mad. And he goes, no, you don't understand. We're dropping the case. But you see the attitude? That's a lot of what you're dealing with. Now, again, not all educators. I don't want to paint a broad brush. But there's a lot of them like that. And so when you come to them with things like this, passing a child along even if they can't read, and so so what? It doesn't matter to them.
They pay no price.
Yeah, they pay no price.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question. We got to move right along here. We don't have that much time left. For Tom, is the pendulum swinging back toward an emphasis on career and technical ed, or will Michigan continue with high school standards that prepare everyone for college?
Well, I'll let Melanie also weigh in on this, but I mean, it really does get back to what is the purpose of education. It is not to get a job. And it's swinging back, but it sounds like by the question they think it's a good thing, or maybe they don't. I couldn't tell, but that is what it's all about. Practicality and getting kids a job, where education really is to have somebody grounded in truth, based on history, based on facts and knowledge, to be a good citizen and to love learning so that they'll continue to love learning. But instead, it's about the drudgery of what am I going to do when I graduate? And when we were going to in high school, you go to college, you don't know what you're going to do necessarily. I mean, some people have an idea, but you might, the way the society is going with technology, the disruption is going on all the time. You are not going to have one job. You're not going to have 4 jobs. You'll have 10 or 20 jobs. And you got to have people very agile and really with a very well-rounded liberal arts education in the future. So, I don't know.
Well, the only other thing I would add is the workforce development system. So Common Core are the data tags, and every student carries a electronic backpack. And they're evaluated on each one of these standards in what they do on the computer. And that data system feeds into a data system that employers provide their job needs. And then the computer matches kids' characteristics and their social emotional learning, their values and ethics to the job needs that the employers put in, and tell the 8th grader, in some cases even 6th grader, you should plan to be a truck driver. Because as was said this morning, which we have had this example, many little 6th grade boys have been told they're going to be an over-the-road trucker because that's the highest demand job right now. The system doesn't know that 5 years from now, most over-the-road trucking will be done by computers. And our children will be prepared for a job that doesn't exist and not prepared for a job they could do had they been properly educated.
Okay, thank you, Melanie. And you got another question. Melanie, how would a voucher system affect state control over private schools? And would state require testing if a school accepted vouchers?
So vouchers are government money. So that with the golden rule, Mike did a good job, remember, he who provides the gold sets the rules. They have a new model, education savings accounts. You get to keep your money in a savings account and then spend it on education. There's the rub. Who decides what expenditures are appropriate or inappropriate? And, right. And then they can turn around and say to the schools that take money that you pulled out of your education savings account as a recipient of money from this government program, you must now certify your teachers through the state program, teach Common Core, administer the state assessments. I can't tell you how awful the concept is and how it's a trap, and it's embarrassing that Betsy DeVos has convinced Donald Trump that this is a good idea. And we're really hoping that we might be able to get an ear in there so that he understands why programs like this are not what he campaigned on.
Okay. We're starting to get an influx of people from the other groups, but I'd like to wait just a minute and answer one more question, and that is, do liberals want illiterate graduates? Now, let me be the first to answer this. I believe they do, because illiterate people are dependent on government, and the more dependence the government has, the bigger government gets, and the more Democrat, should I have said that, voters there are. So that's my answer. Anybody else want to answer that?
Yeah, I'll take this. Well, I would say that, you know, I mean, the Republicans push Common Core, and they're making it more illiterate. So, you know, I really, and there are some very good-hearted liberals or Democrats. I work with some of them on the state board that, you know, they are good people, and so I don't think you could say that all liberals want that. The progressives are the bad, you know, the ones that want to move us to socialism. You might be right there, but I do think that, you know, we can't just, the broad brush has to be careful. But yeah, I you know, there's certainly some that don't want to have a good history and don't want them to be literate in a lot of things about socialism.
Yeah, I would say that the answer is yes, but the question would be, do leftists want illiterate graduates, not liberals? And I think we need to start reclaiming that, the title of liberal back. But yes, leftists do want illiterate graduates. They're easier to control, they're easier to direct. Also, because illiterate people have to rely on other people for information, and leftists want to be the people doing that directing, where you know, we conservatives and libertarians, we want people to be able to make those decisions on their own. You see that I'm wearing sea green ribbons today. That's in honor of the English Civil War era levelers, who were history's first modern libertarians. And they believed many of the things that they wanted ended up in our Constitution a century and a half later. And one of the things that they believed, though, was that in order for a citizen to be a proper citizen, they had to be properly educated, they had to be learned, so that they could know the truth of the world, they could know the truth of God for themselves, and not because someone else told them to do it, and that a person had an obligation to be moral, which in the leveler world meant religion, meant the organization, it meant the church, and they did not want state-run churches because religion and the state are mutually corrupting, but they wanted the individual to be moral, and by that what they meant was go to church. You are free to go to church wherever you want, but go to church because you have an obligation to be moral, and morality is where religion and the real world come together.
Let me just add one point, that reiterating what Tom said. This is not a Democrat versus Republican issue. Our Republican leadership has let us down on education as badly as the Democrats. It is an elite group of all those people on both sides of the aisle that think the rest of us can't manage our lives and they need to help us do it. Whether it's a Republican businessman or a Democrat union leader, they're all in the same behavior pattern. They have their different strategies, but they are the ones messing with the grassroots.
Okay, got 2 more questions, and we got to get out of here. So keep the answer short. What is your recommendation for qualifications, standards, criteria for students to graduate?
Well, I'll just say that I think, after I'm talking about no state accountability, your question might be, what accountability do you want? Or how are we going to make sure we have good education? I think it's 2 things. I think it's local control and getting involved. And I know that unions have, organized at this local level, but it's better, I think, to have strong local control and strong choice. If we have real choice, we don't have real choice with charters. That we have these authorizers are really just kind of a, I know I'm on camera, but a cabal. I mean, there's 7 universities. They're the only ones that can authorize. And I know the ones that did the Livingston Classical, they had a heck of a time. I mean, you can't have a real good classical education because it's not they're not going to be Common Core aligned, or they may not, it's all about the standards, and so they have their little cliques. So I think we should allow cities and townships to authorize charter schools, and I really think we need more choice, to be quite honest with you, for better accountability.
Did you want to take that question about standards?
Okay. Why are Chinese sending their students here for high school? As the plan Team 20 is expressing, how many school districts do you think have signed these contracts?
So it's an interesting question. The argument is they're trying to do outreach. We also have what are the Chinese academies where the Chinese government is sending Chinese teachers for free, and public schools can hire them to teach the kids Chinese, which nobody in the school knows how to speak Chinese, so pretty soon the teachers can be saying things to the kids that nobody else will know what they're saying. But
Right.
So it's an interesting phenomena that's happening. The Chinese teachers that are being sent are not allowed to stay here very long. So I don't know.
I think it has to do also with what I said. China knows they're in deep trouble. They have no creativity. And so they really want to try to have an education system. They've tried to figure out how to make it so that they don't kill creativity, because that's what's made us great. And we're killing it more and more now with high-stakes testing. But they want to try, I believe, perhaps, that they want to try to say, how can we improve and be more like America while we're trying to be more like China with high-stakes testing.
And another part of that would be certification. It's easier for Chinese students to receive diplomas and degrees in the United States if they have an American education than if they're in Chinese schools. And unfortunately, we've gotten into a society where credentials mean a lot more than actual education.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, David. Thank you, Melanie. And thank you all for being here. And like I said earlier, let's get involved. If you can write down your name, phone number, email address, it's where, Melanie?
On the MICPAC table.
On the MICPAC table. And let's get involved. Let's start trying to get the right things done for our kids, our grandkids, our great-grandkids, and the country. Because if we don't educate our kids correctly, well, should I use the word correctly? If we don't educate our kids to the facts of what's happened in our history and what's going on now, our country is in big trouble. So, please help us. Thank you very much.
Great people here. And this is outreach with veterans, minorities, children, all different kinds of people. And okay. All right. And so we're going to each speak for 6 minutes now because we have 5 people, and then we'll each take a question. So if somebody wants to write questions, I'll pick one. Try to have one for every person so we can hear from them. And we can start with Tom Norton.
It's green now. Alrighty, so I'm supposed to talk about veterans. Anyway, I'm a founding board member of West Michigan Veterans Ranch. The suicide prevention, spiritual healing for veterans. We try to give them different directions and things of that nature. We reach out. I was an American Legion Post Commander. We went from 67 members up to about 197 in the 2 years I was commander. And a lot of that took it in from vets from my era. And each year I usually talk about what we do and why we brought it in there, but it's kind of encompassing. So what I kind of felt like doing today was sharing this story of what built West Michigan's Veterans Ranch and the organization. So back in 2014, I was an American Legion Post Commander, and my wife and I were going out on a date. And I walked into the Legion Post. A gentleman had been in there 5 minutes earlier, and the bartender, Tina, said, "Tom, you need to call this guy." So I called him, and over the phone he kept repeating he was going to lose his apartment. He didn't know what he was going to do. And I sit there, I told him, "You get back here, I'll help you with your apartment. Sit down, I'll buy you a beer." It took about 5 minutes to get him to turn around. We waited. He sat down, and he started to list that he had lost his job. He was going to lose his apartment. He was going to lose his car. His wife had divorced him, and he couldn't afford an attorney. He hadn't seen his kids in 3 months, and you could clearly see the physical drain on him. And my wife and I were supposed to be going out on date night, and he said, "I got to go to the bathroom." And I said, "When you get back, I got 2 questions I got to ask you." Got up to go to the bathroom. My wife looked at me and said, "If you let him go home, he's going to commit suicide." And I looked at her and I said, "I know that." And I've never been one for really in-depth emotional connection because I was in the infantry, and that just makes it difficult. You get hard and a little bit more firm. So he came back, he sat down, and I had heard veteran stories over the past couple of years of our congressmen where I live telling them, "You're not our problem, go to the VA," things of that nature. Well, 14 days earlier, that person who used to be a friend of mine had told me I'd never hear the story again. And I looked at him, and the first question I asked David was, "Did you call the VA?" And he said, "Well, yeah, but it'll take them weeks." And then I said, "Okay," and there's a way to, I said, "There's a way to speed it up, get a congressman to call the VA." And he said, "Yeah, I did that." And I said, "What did your congressman say?" He said, "You're not our problem, the Veterans Administration does that." I looked at David, didn't talk to my wife about it, and she sat there and told me later she was scared to death what I was going to do. And I said, "Before you leave here, your apartment will be paid. I'm going to make up your car payment, and in 14 days you'll have a job, and I'll find you an attorney later." And at the time, we didn't make a lot of money, so that's like everything we had in our savings account. So she, and that was at 3:30 in the afternoon. I got on the phone, started calling down it one by one. By the time we were done, I had a guy pay for his apartment for 6 months. I had another guy pay his car off. We found him a part-time job. And we ended up finding him an attorney. So it was in 2 hours and 20 minutes, you saw the physical stress lift off this individual. For years, I kept this story to myself for the past couple months. That's why we built the West Michigan Veterans Ranch. So anyway, a couple years later, David did suicide prevention marches with me and everything else. He ended up getting in a car accident. He's a tough old soldier. He said, "I'm going to go home and take some aspirin." And he died in his bed from a concussion. So the West Michigan Veterans Ranch, the outreach that we need to do is to reach out in the communities to help each individual ourselves. That's the compassion that's in each human being. And the question I started to ask myself when I started sharing this story is, if that would happen with a Republican congressman, what happens with Democrats? What happens with other ones? How many veterans that we haven't seen, that we haven't affected, have went home and committed suicide because they don't feel like anybody is out there reaching out to them and helping them? It's not so much to thank them, it's to figure out and identify what their needs are. And the only way we can do that is to make sure we spiritually connect and help them in the best possible way to be individuals again, put together.
Thank you so much for that great story, and thank you for your service and everything that you've done. Next up, we have Adam Edward Green, and he's from MSU, the James Madison College Conservatives.
Yep.
And he just had a pretty interesting event. I try to go, one thing on outreach, I personally go on campuses and support all of these guys, and they see me everywhere.
Yep.
And so that's one way, it's more than just him reaching out, it's us supporting them too. So with that, Adam, please tell us.
Yeah,
something.
absolutely. Well, thank you, Dawn. Thank you for that. And Dawn mentioned, my name is Adam Green with the James Madison College Conservatives over at Michigan State University. We have any Spartans in the room? Maybe? All right, go Green. There we go. So anyways, very happy to be here. Thank you, Norm, again, for having me to Michigan CPAC. Came here last year. Sorry we couldn't get more college students here. We have finals next week, so we've been working hard trying to earn that degree. So anyways, what Dawn mentioned was last week we had an event with Lieutenant Governors Brian Calley, and then, don't cry too much of this, Garland Gilchrist as well. It was a bipartisan event, and I'll kind of touch on bipartisanship and what we've been working on at Michigan State and how we're engaging with conservatives at Michigan State. But this is one of the ways we've been trying to do it, is having these bipartisan type of events to bring out people in order to ultimately show them the worth and merit of our conservative ideals. And that's what it's going to take, especially coming from a youth perspective, being on campus. Predominantly liberal, especially Michigan State. James Madison College, what I'm doing is obviously predominantly liberal, and it's going to take these bipartisan type of events in order for us to engage with those that you disagree with. And ultimately, for a lot of people, it's something we're not comfortable with. It's very uncomfortable to talk with someone who you disagree with on something. I've had a lot of people be very upset with me all across the state because we've been doing a lot of these events in the past 2 years. We've held, I think, over 20 bipartisan policy forums, student-led debates, and candidate town halls in the past 2 years, really trying to engage all these different groups on campus in order to bring them in, show them what conservatism is, and ultimately hope to convince them of our ideas once they walk out of there. So, for example, we had a debate with the college Democrats, the MSU College Democrats, on the Green New Deal. How does everybody think about the Green New Deal? Yeah, me too. So, but ultimately with this debate, we didn't want it to be a shouting match. We don't grow the movement when you just shout at the other side. When we're going to be pessimistic towards liberals and the Democrats. Ultimately, it's going to take us bringing them into a civil conversation and debate, however uncomfortable that may be, in order to show them, what our ideas are. So, I had probably about 6 or 7 people following that debate from the MSU College Democrats come up after and say, hey, I really like what you guys had to say about climate change, what you guys had to say with your dissenting opinion on the Green New Deal. We don't agree with the Green New Deal, we support you. We support your ideas. And it's been monumental in the past 2 years, the amount of people that have come up to us following our discussions saying, we support the conservative ideas. We didn't hear it this way. We just heard it on the news. There's a skewed agenda the news is pushing, and they don't show conservatives in a true light. So what it's going to take is ultimately us all coming together with that other side, no matter how much we disagree with them, to show them that, hey, this is exactly what conservatism is. This is what we want to bring to this country. It's what it's going to take for all of us. And let me tell you, conservatism is strong on campus. It's not always vocal. They're not always out front, but there's a lot of conservatives on campus, and we've been bringing them out. And really, it's because a lot of these conservatives are more moderate. We have a lot of the youth are more moderate. So we need to encourage them to come to these debates, come to these discussions, and engage with one another so that we can help them speak up and speak out. I mean, that is how we're going to keep winning in this state. We're going to hold more state offices, federal offices. We're going to take back the Senate in 2020. We're going to hold the presidency in 2020, take back Congress in 2020. I mean, we have a lot coming, and really the youth is where it starts. I mean, this is the next generation of leaders, I'd like to hope, coming through the system, and the next generation of our party and our movement. So we need to keep everybody together and, you know, promoting our ideals. Again, you know, we may not always agree on what exactly, you know, the issues are and the solutions to these problems that we all face, but we need to have those tough conversations with those you disagree with. And I think this is really what outreach is all about. And thank you again to Dawn. She's come to a lot of our debates and discussions, because it's nice to see, you know, what they have to say on the other side, because then, you know, we're able to, you know, better craft our argument to try to convince them to say, hey, this is what we're all about, this is what conservatism is, and what we're going to do for the country. You know, we need to all just keep sticking together, all parts of our party, to keep our country moving forward and focusing on everyone's right to life. I mean, let me emphasize right to life, the right to liberty, and everybody's right to pursuit of happiness in this country. Don't let the news speak for what conservatism is in this country. You have to engage. You have to engage with those people who their only source of what a conservative is from the news. So, you know, engage those people. We got to keep moving this movement forward each and every week. You know, very trying times coming up, 2020. So, thank you again, and you know, keep engaging. That's all I can say.
Thank you so much, Adam. And I just wanted to say that after he did that, he actually persuaded at least 2 tables, half of the tables. And so that's what it's about. He's actually influencing them. And I mean, they had been grabbed as soon as they got on the college campus by the liberals. And they like him so much that they were able to listen to him, and it persuaded some of them. So that's what it's about. All right, and so our next up is Miss Christina Barr, Sister in Christ. She's done many things for the party. She's a consultant right now, and she's going to speak to you today for some time. Thank you, Christina.
Yeah, so I'm not Gina, obviously. Yeah, she said it right. There's some other people in the room, but it's funny because being involved, and Gina was out in D.C. a little bit because she worked for the RNC for a little while, and I was, you know, the former coalition's vice chair, and worked as a creative director for the party. So people were starting to get to know me a little bit more. So she became Christina's sister, and so that was, you know, interesting as the little sister. People referring to her that way. And then she ran for chair, and then I'm like, oh no, I'm going to be Gina's sister now. And so it did revert back to that, but I love her. But anyway, like I said, I was the creative director at MRP during our 2016 victory, so I was part of that cycle. And I was on for the next cycle a little bit, and then I started consulting for a couple of different campaigns. Before that, in 2014, I ran for state rep a little bit, and I lost my primary by 6 votes. And then, yeah, but by a twist of fate, I ended up filling in the spot for Congress. So I actually ran for Congress in 2014 and got involved in my district, and, you know, got on state committee, and then, you know, eventually became the coalition's vice chair. But to speak to outreach, you know, I want to tell a story about this event that we had when Marvel's Black Panther, not the group, you know, but not the organization, but the movie that came out. When that came out, I talked to my sister when she was working at the RNC. I'm like, can we get some kind of event where we, like, you know, go to the theater, pay for the movie, and then have like some, you know, kind of panel or something? So she put it together, got the RNC to pay for it. And so before the movie started, we had a business panel, and we talked about all the great benefits of the tax plan, and we had some really great business leaders there. And so we didn't advertise it as a Republican event. So there was like 70% of the room were not Republican. And so then that's the way she likes it, because you don't want to always preach to the choir all the time. And that's a problem that sometimes we have. We keep preaching the same people all the time. And so when we got done with the panel, because going through all the stuff in the tax and people had already noticed that they got some more money back on their paychecks, and people were listening to the benefits. When it was over, we were bracing ourselves for the questions because we knew there were some people that seemed inquisitive but were Democrats. And so one woman stood up and she said, Gina was like moderating, and I was on the panel too, but they said, Gina, what you're telling us, the media isn't telling us this information. So what are you guys going to do? What are you Republicans going to do? Because we're not getting this information, and most of African Americans are Democrats. So we're not armed with the tools to help our families. And so at that point, all we could really say is that we're trying, and that's why we have events like these. And so working and trying to get outreach pushed, there's some people that in leadership who really want to make a difference, and there's some people who think that it's a waste of resources and a waste of time, and they'd rather pump out the red than going into areas like in Wayne County. And we saw with like Tammy Carlone's race, she won everywhere. She except for Wayne County. She went to bed thinking that she had won and woke up and had lost. And John James's race, he won, he was doing a great job. It was very close. And I think he was like 0.13 away from Debbie Stabenow until Wayne County dropped. And then there's 6 points. And so as we ran the race for Gina for chair, we were going around talking to people. It didn't matter what side of the state we were on. We went all the way up to the UP, and everybody wanted to know, what are we going to do about Detroit? What are we going to do about Wayne County? What do we do about Flint and other places? Because we can't keep winning everywhere else and losing these heavily dense populated areas. And the answer is not to just cut out, Detroit and send them on their way floating down the river. The answer is that we need to expand our base. And we need to learn how to talk, have conversations with people. And I would work on messaging. I didn't think it was that hard to do because you just listen to people and you see where their concerns are and you try to find solutions. And if you're sincere with actually trying to solve people's problems, then you can make that connection. But sometimes there's some leadership issues, sometimes there's some issues with consultants and other people. Gina actually wrote an article in Washington Examiner. You can look it up. It's about outreach, but that'll explain some things. But it's something we got to constantly work on because the lines are getting redrawn and our legislators aren't redrawing them. And we have to, our red areas aren't going to be so red next time. So it's pretty inevitable that we have to expand our base.
Thank you so much. And next up, we have Madeline Mellon.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello. As you just heard, my name is Madeline Mellon. I'm 12. I'm a 6th grader. I'm here to talk about knowing, reaching, and mentoring people my age or in the age group. A good way that I can identify people that have the same beliefs as me is listening to them in school when a teacher may say something that has more heavily on their beliefs than on facts. They're the ones that are more likely to talk about it and say, please don't do that. That's happened before. Or if you speak up, you can tell that there will be certain people that will agree with you and there will be certain people that will not. Some people even start internet chat groups saying like, come here if your school won't allow you to make a formal club. Because it used to be just ask your teacher to sponsor a club and now you have a club, but no one would ever, not no one, but no teacher would ever sponsor that club now. So other ways you could do it would be going online, like I said, starting like a church group of some sort, or just talking to them one-on-one. It doesn't have to be complicated. You can just be like, we have the same beliefs. Woo. Same with reaching them, internet, church groups, those both work. And a good way after you know what they what their beliefs are, you can discuss it with them. You don't have to be like, listen to me because I'm right and you're wrong. But you can definitely talk to them about it and try your best to help them understand your side of the argument. And if they refuse to, well, in the long run, they'll definitely understand what you're talking about when you say free college isn't free. So a good way of mentoring would just be telling them the facts, numbers, the unemployment rate, or lack thereof. Ask them where they found out what they're talking about, like where they got it, social media, parents, just friends in general, or a big source, like I said, teachers will also be talking about it often. I've had instances where we watch a little clip in the beginning of school about what's going on in the world. It's called CNN 10, and it doesn't really have their opinions in it, but in the middle of the school year, it would be talking about the wall a lot because that was pretty prevalent, and then my teacher would pause the video whether someone would be asking a question or they just wanted to add in onto what they were saying, like the video was saying. And they'd say something like, they were gassing children. That's what they were doing about our border agents. And they wouldn't tell us about how they were getting thrown rocks at them. He just kind of told us that we were harming people that weren't doing anything to us. And I was one of the few that would be saying something like, well, it's illegal and they're harming us, so. And another good way is to just try to make an informal group, maybe meet after or before school and talk to the people that you know believe in the same things as you. And if someone that doesn't believe in the same thing but isn't really sure what is the right and wrong, or they aren't sure what they should think politically, they could join that too. It doesn't all need to be hard right. It can be anyone that you can talk to. A good way of saying it is people at school, you can talk to whoever you need to or want to, because politics isn't really a big thing, but teachers try to make it a big thing. So what you can do is you can just kind of ask the teacher to either stop or maybe raise your hand and just say what you think, because the teachers will definitely be saying things, and sometimes the teacher will catch on to what you think and and stop calling on you. But most of the time, they will call on you anyway, and they'll listen to what you have to say, and they won't stop, but other people will be more informed. So the best way is to not be aggressive, but just kind of say the truth that you can find in numbers, and don't just say yelling at them. Don't just yell at them, I guess. Try to make a good debate out of it, and that's the best thing I can say about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Maddie. So I know you all saw this in the brochure, but she became our star when we met her. MCU co-hosted when Steve Bannon was here for the We Build the Wall, Brian Koffledge, and we had Sheriff Clark here, and one more person, and we had, yes, Joy Villa. And it was wonderful. So, yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Yeah, so thank you. And now I'm going to introduce Tyrell Bundy, and he got elected, congratulations, with the MRP, woo, for outreach, right? Outreach chair. And he's going to tell us a little bit about that.
Same thing. Good evening. I wanted first to say she's very courageous, Madeline. Let's give her a round of applause. I think it's very important that we really do listen to the youth. I was going to start off about Wayne County, but seeing that she went to touch on her points and Adam's point, I think is very important, because essentially they very much so are the future of the party. But we have to recognize that it's a new time, it's a new generation, and that the youth nowadays, they're conservative. I call it contemporary conservatism, is more of a moderate, and we have to recognize that. And all too often we write them off because they might be moderate. And we fail to realize and see that they actually have conservative views. And we have to basically take those conservative views into consideration and reach to those views and opinions. And we can invite them in the party and continue to grow our base from a youth standpoint. But I am a longtime conservative. I am from the city of Detroit. I joined the party in 2012. I pretty much cut my teeth in Wayne County. And as we all know, we hear a lot of doom and gloom come from Wayne County, but I'm here to say that there is a lot of optimism there for a lot of reasons. A lot of people don't know that the prime example, the city of Detroit, in a regular election, the turnout is roughly about 30%. We just had an influx this past November to around about 43%. And you could say a lot of the proposals had a lot to do with that. But even Democrats can't get the other 70% out to vote. And that's where we have to come in and we have to step up to that challenge. It's all about messaging and what's worked for myself, as Christina pointed out, messaging. It's very key, it's very critical. We just can't say, you know, be a Republican, join the Republican Party. What works best is when you have a message that resonates with an issue to specific demographics, whether it's youth, African American, or other. When you take that approach, they will give you the time and attention, and from there, it's up to us to basically hit our marks and execute. Another thing that we have to do as far as resources, all too often we look at the political map. When we get to Wayne County, we basically just skim over it. There are precincts and districts within Detroit and Wayne County that are Republican leaning. Redford used to be a Republican stronghold. We still have conservatives there and conservative support in Inkster. I think it's imperative that we basically grow these areas specifically and not just, again, leave them out to dry, so to speak, because these are the individuals that are in the communities that basically are going to get out, knock doors, and help champion our message. So we have to support them. Again, like I said, Wayne County, it's very diverse. So we have to tailor our message to the demographics that we choose to reach. We just can't go in with a cookie cutter approach and think one message is just going to attract all. It just doesn't work that way. So with some strategy and, again, some planning, we can actually make headway in Wayne County. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. At this time, I'm going to take a question for each of our panelists. Yes, Janice.
I'd like to ask Madeline if there is such a organization as middle school conservative possibility started a group like that, because we get conservative would help you form that group, middle school conservative.
Well, there is a teenage conservative group. I'm not sure if there is one for middle schoolers. Maybe. I'm not sure. Yeah, probably. Okay.
Are there any more questions for any of the other panelists? Yeah, I have one. Okay. Okay.
Absolutely, what she just said in the front row. It's about showing. First and foremost, all too often when we do go into minority communities, we essentially go election season, an election cycle. That's too late. We have to go when there's no election, there's nothing at stake, to let the community know we're there for the right reasons. Not just, hey, vote for me, and then the cycle passes, we're gone. Same thing. You look at Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton, she opened up her Detroit office when she ran. It opened, I think it was maybe late December. Late December, it was she basically closed down shortly after the election cycle the following November. We had a Detroit office there for over 3 years. We were there when it counted. So it's little things like that. You have to be there for the right reasons. You just can't come around election cycle asking for votes. Second, when it comes to things of that sort, you have to, it takes an open dialogue. You very much so have to be candid. All too often, like I say, we have divisive times, and we have to understand that when we choose and pick sides on certain issues, no matter how right we are, we will come across as being the villain or demonized simply because of the misinformation and the rhetoric that's out there today in today's society. So we have to have, as I say, an open hands approach that, you know what, it's okay to disagree, but here's what we can agree upon. Here's how I can help you. Here's the issues that are important to us all. And if we address these and you look at it from this perspective, you know what, this is common ground, and then you can make headway from that perspective.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Another thing, like if some of the events that we have with outreach, like if you invited them to something like the thing I described with the Black Panther, do you think maybe they would maybe go to something like that, hear from other Black business professionals, and kind of hear the facts from other people who can maybe break it down in a different way, in like a more comfortable environment where they see other people interacting with Republicans who are African Americans, so they can know that it's not like some kind of Klan event and stuff. And sometimes people do have that perception. And somebody came to the Detroit office one time and they said, I think I'm a Republican, but they were terrified that it actually was like Klan meetings and so Gina got them connected with some people, and he came to like some events there, and he met people, and he saw that nobody was crazy, nobody was racist, there was actually more Black people involved than they thought. And so now they're involved with the party. And we had that Black History Month dinners. Sometimes we'd invite people who were like in the middle, who were on the fence, and they saw a room full of other people that was kind of like them, and they kind of was like, maybe it's okay to come out and say that I actually am a Republican. And I can say the RNC spent a lot of money on research to find out that sometimes the message comes better from people who do look like you. Which I don't know why they had to pay money to find that out, but they did. It was a canvassing project. There's data for it.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to make a couple comments. There's a celebration every year called Juneteenth. I always participate and just kind of go in other folks' worlds. And for me, I just go to church, so that's always good. Because then you're wherever they are, and you can just learn a lot by that. It's been that way for me for 30 years. So just some thoughts on that. Is there anybody else that has a question for a different panel member? Okay.
I'd like to ask Tom Norton how we can help.
Okay.
The best way to actually be able to help when it comes into the veterans can only help other veterans. But when it comes into like church communities and stuff like that, when you have a veteran that's actually leading and reaching out in the community, that's the guy that you go to and have that individual be the liaison. It's kind of like what Ms. Barr and Ty are saying. Somebody with the same basic background are the only ones that are going to be able to communicate the entire time as you're reaching out. Like there's organizations besides West Michigan Veterans Ranch, which is, my first platoon sergeant, people that served with me, that's one organization. Another platoon sergeant that served with me runs Hometown Heroes, and they literally their only job is to raise money to pay bills and get people jobs. And it's funny the amount of people that we've just worked with, and they build their own organization. They didn't like me. But that's basically what you have to do, is you have to find people that can reach it out. Our Legion Post grew because I'd go around the room and ask people for ideas. And what they'd end up doing is I'd sit there and they was like, I'd like to do this. All I simply had to do to get membership
was to tell them, okay, take yourself, a few other people, and then we'll help you organize it, and I let them lead it. It's not to the same, organizations grow when you empower more people. They don't grow when it's the same people doing it every time. That's why, like this event, it's got, a few years ago, it was really small, and then it's grown again. And it's because there's so many people putting in their hands and reaching out one step at a time, bringing a friend, bringing a neighbor. And that's how we're going to actually rebuild the conservative movement. Like Ty's saying, bring in, he's talking about reaching out to moderates. If you foster the conservative values that people have and get them to shift their own opinion, that's how you do it. You do it through questioning. Ask them a question and get them to think. If I tell you something, your walls go up. But if I ask you a question, your walls go down. That's actually how you do it at each part. So if you want to help people, connect with that person and always ask the right questions.
We have a son-in-law who's a veteran, and we have a grandson who's a veteran. So we have them in the family, but I don't think either one of them belong to any kind of a...
American Legion, VFW, and DAV are the best three.
The other thing we have is we have a homeless street, a street with houses on it for homeless veterans. But there have been people that have waited 2 years to get into that housing, and they're often on foot. In northern Michigan, there's no place to be on foot.
I paid for 3 veterans that were homeless this past winter for their apartment bills. I just paid for them for a few months until they got up their feet and got a job. And there's some veterans that at some point you have to cut off how much money you're sending to them because you can't get them the help they need. They're just too broken. So that's, some of those people are just that broken.
And thank you so much. And maybe afterwards you could talk with him as well and he could give you some thank you. Is there anyone with a question for Mr. Adam? Oh, yes.
Adam, if you look back at this last year and a half or 2 years, do you feel like you're about status quo as far as warm red bodies, or do you think you're picking up a little bit of steam?
As far as like on college campus, like with...
On your campus,
yep.
where you are working in the fields.
Absolutely. No, I think the movement has grown exponentially since we started really pushing out these type of discussions. Just kind of like what I noted on is so many people would come up to me after these discussions, debates, or like message me on Facebook and say, we're just so amazed by your kind of realistic and logistical, like, you know, our view, you know, to some of these issues that are going on, especially like with the Green New Deal we talked about. So I definitely think when we're having these discussions, these people are really convinced because they're not able to see it on the news. They don't hear it from their college professors. So it's going to take, again, kind of everybody up here is saying, it takes, you know, hearing from your counterparts. So when we have a student-led discussion, the results have been magnificent. I mean, we've had a lot of people. So we started, so this, our group, JMC Conservatives, the James Madison College Conservatives. If you want to look up what we do, go to jmcconservatives.com and check out the events. But we started with like 2 of us, or about 3 of us in a dorm room in January of 2018. And then to now, we're over 100 people in the group. So, yeah. And that doesn't even encompass all the people that still come to our events, because there is a core group of, I would say, moderate liberals that come to every single one of our events, but are not technically part of the group, but are like kind of getting there. They're kind of getting to be a conservative. So it's really just about chipping away, and just what Tom said, it's not about speaking at them, it's about asking them what they believe, why they believe, and you know, how we can help and how a conservative can help.
I perceive you're giving them permission to think differently from their instructors. Good work.
Indeed, yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Well, at this time, I'm going to dismiss the panel, and if you'd like to talk to any of them, please grab them. I know I'm going to be talking to Christina and Ty personally, and probably everybody here. And I'm going to bring up Randy Bishop so I can stay on time, and you can just talk with them off the panel. Thank you so much for participating.
Thank you. We'll support you, and I will help you get elected. Support Israel, and support any president that wants to move back to Jerusalem, our embassy. Justin Amash said, Dave, you have my word. He said then, too, do not fund anything in the military that has to do with transgenderism or sex change. He looked him right in his face and told Dave Ajema, I will not support that. Justin Amash voted against the moving of the embassy to Jerusalem, and he voted for transgenders to be able to have sex change operations, and us, the taxpayers, pay for it. I'm here today to let you guys know that Tom Norton has filed his papers yesterday and is going to primary challenge Justin Amash. Thank you, brother. You can go to your phone right now. It's TomNortonUSA.com. If you don't go to your phone, write it down. TomNortonUSA.com. Put your name, your email address, and make a $5, $10 donation just to show him that you support his run. With that, I'm going to introduce the next speaker. His name is Stephen Rowe from Virginia's Leadership Institute with instruction for nearly 3 hours, specially developed curriculum. He gives these classes for 3 hours to focus on what is required of great leadership and the methods of obtaining it. Stephen serves as the Deputy Director for Digital Training at the Leadership Institute. He was former Editor-in-Chief for Turning Point, Charlie Kirk, Turning Point USA. He was the editor-in-chief, reaching more than 12 million viewers for President Trump's election back in 2016. Native of Montana. Really, brother? Montana? Montana have black people out there? All right. I'm believing him. He's been listed of winning multiple 30-year awards. His work has been featured on Fox News, Fox Business, The Blaze, The Daily Caller, The Washington Slimes, the Town Hall, Breitbart, and the Daily Wire. He's not going to teach us for 3 hours. Oh, good. You got about 3 minutes. No, I'm kidding. Stephen Rowe.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, brother.
Absolutely. What's going on, everyone? All right. Raise your hand if you're also from Montana. Hey. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's how that usually goes. Almost no one ever raises their hand. Every now and then you do see one person who raises their hand and it's like, yes, finally, like we just became best friends from that Step Brothers movie for sure. But yeah, and there are not a lot of black people in Montana, and I usually joke with people that there were 7 before I left, and well, now there's 6. Yeah, absolutely. So working on that just a little bit, but definitely love the great state of Montana. If you ever get the chance to go, highly recommend. It is fantastic. And I also spent a year-ish and a half, as he noted, in Illinois, in Chicago. And that was not as fantastic. That was actually very much a poor experience. I did not like that state very much. I apologize for anybody who may have grown up in Illinois, but it's real tough. Especially coming from Montana where you're winning all the time and everyone's conservative and, you know, we're just fighting over 5% of issues and we're doing okay. You go to Illinois and then it's like, whoa. Like you look at Chicago and it's brutal. It's like 90% Democrat, like union run, the Mike Madigan machine. You look at Illinois and then you see squishy Republicans, especially their governor, Bruce Rauner, who was not very pro-life at all, which was very disappointing. All that type of stuff, and I was like, this is not for me. And now I work in the swamp in Washington, D.C. I can't say it's much better, but it is where we have to be if we want to make decisions as it relates to the Congress and things of that nature. I mean, a lot of politics happens there. But I'm here to talk to you very briefly. I don't want to take too much of your time because it's been an extremely long day and I feel you on all of that. But I do want to introduce the Leadership Institute to all of you just a little bit for those of you who may be unaware. So I work for the Leadership Institute. It's a fantastic organization, and essentially what we do is we train conservatives. We want to turn soldiers into super soldiers. We want to make you the most effective activist possible. And we did that a little bit yesterday with the Leadership Academy And we do it across the country in all 50 states. So if we can be a resource for you, I encourage you to take a peek at our website, leadershipinstitute.org. We have a ton of trainings for you, both online and in person, and we will come to you as well with our grassroots department. So we just want to make you effective. And one of my favorite things about our founder, Morton Blackwell, who's a living legend, is that he aims to build a movement, not an empire. And so there's a lot of organizations that, you know, want to take the credit or want you to use their name, and we want none of that. We want you, whatever your organization is, to succeed as long as you're advancing conservative principles. And so whatever that is, we want to help boost you up. We want to make you more powerful, more impactful, because we've seen time and time again in history the amazing feats of a few beating many, right? David versus Goliath, the 300 Spartans that took on the Persian army. So many references in history highlight a small group of people who are committed and passionate. My favorite example of this is the American Revolution, right? A small group of people that decided enough is enough, we're going to fight back and we're going to win. Now, that small group has to be more trained, that has to be more passionate, has to be more committed. And so that's what we want to do for you. And so I always like to refer to us as the HR of the movement, because that's what we do. We train you, and we also provide opportunities as well. So we have a job seekers guide as well. And if you're looking for jobs in politics, we have a website called conservativejobs.com. And if you have, you know, someone younger who is looking to enter the field of politics, or you yourself, it goes entry level all the way to professional, vice presidents of organizations that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars are posted on this job website. It's like Indeed/Glassdoor/LinkedIn jobs for politics, for conservatives. So I hopefully, if that can be a resource for you, definitely check it out. And then the final thing that I want to pitch before I kind of hop into what I want to talk about here is we have now online training. And so, like I said, you can watch from the comfort of your home on any device and access our training. So if we can be a resource, definitely let us know. But I'm mainly here on this stage to talk to you about three things just real quickly. The first one is storytelling. And those who attended the Leadership Academy yesterday heard this story, and I want to share a story with you before I elaborate more on why I'm talking about storytelling. And the story I want to tell is the story of Amy. Amy is 12 years old. She's blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and used to have the biggest smile on her face. But that smile isn't there anymore. Amy just ran away from school for the third time because she's being repeatedly bullied at her school. And it's not physical bullying, so the teachers really can't do too much about it. And now, Amy has to eventually, after she wipes the tears away from her face, go back to that school that will, again, where she's going to face just bullying time and time again. She's talked to her parents about it, and she's talked to her teachers, and like I said, they can do very little about it. Her parents, unfortunately, are not in a financial position to send her to a private school or to homeschool her. And so there are very few options due to the big government policies that aren't allowing her to go to a different school. What I'm here to advocate for is that we allow Amy the freedom to choose another school. Her zip code does not define her destiny, and if she's able to go to a different school, her future is going to be very different, where she can become the woman that she was destined to be, an astronaut, and maybe even president of the United States. Whatever that destiny is, she's able to fulfill it just by going to a different school. That's the power of school choice. That's what we're fighting for. And that's pretty much a made-up story. There is no Amy. Amy's not getting bullied, so rest assured. But I wanted to tug at your heartstrings just for a second to illustrate how powerful storytelling really is. People, and there was a lot of speakers, so let's just use today as an example. You're not going to remember what everybody said here today, but I guarantee you, you will remember how people made you feel. And stories connect with people on an emotional level and allow us to advance our policy positions. We've seen a lot of graphs. We know the data, especially when it comes to school choice. We've seen, that private and charter schools outperform public schools, students who are homeschooled excel, etc. And we can show those graphs all day long, but they're not going to connect with people the same way that that story did. I'm already getting bored talking about those statistics, right? We want to go back to the story. And so I have a challenge for you, and I want you to start thinking about your story, the stories that you lived, and how it relates to policy, how it relates to politics, and how can you tell your story in a compelling way with people. And when you tell this story, my biggest ask of all of you is to do it online. Share this story via video, share this story via written text, or share this story via podcast or audio, etc. Whatever medium works best for you, share your story with the world, and I promise you we're going to get more people on our side. The second thing that I want to talk to you after storytelling is connecting with people, and I think the last panel did a really good job at this, especially, I didn't know the guy who was the veteran rock star, for sure. He said something to the effect of asking questions, right? And that's super important. So when we're reaching out to diverse communities, when we're reaching out to people to get them to connect with us as much as possible, asking questions is a great thing. It's an amazing thing. But there's one other thing that I would add, and I'd ask you to ask them, and it's the one ask that you can ask them of. You can always get one ask out of someone, and this is the ask. Ask them to vote their values. If you ask people to vote their values, they're going to look, much like when we're asking questions, they're going to look inward. They're going to look at themselves. So their walls are down, and now they're going to be looking at what their values really are. And the stats are on our side here. 8 out of 10 black Americans identify as Christian. 77% of Hispanics and Latinos are also Christian. And so why are they in the Democratic Party? Why are they with the progressive left who support abortion up until the moment that this baby is being born? Right? And if you ask them to vote their values and dig deep and really be convicted in what they tell you that they believe in, then they're going to start pushing in our direction. So ask people questions, absolutely, but then make one ask of them after you're asking them questions, and that's to vote their values. And now I only have one final thing. It's a third thing, and again, it's one more challenge because I'm very action-orientated. I feel like a lot of people talk and not a lot of people do action. A lot of people talk and almost no one actually knocks on a door, almost no one picks up the phone. I'm fortunate to be in this room with a ton of activists who actually make that call to action, that actually take that step, but it's not enough and we need to keep going. And so my challenge to you, because again, I'm a social media guy, I'm a digital guy, is we are losing online a lot. You know, I see impeach Donald Trump trending on Twitter like twice a week. And we can fight back. We can be in this arena, but we have a very limiting mindset sometimes where we say, oh, that's not for me. Oh, I'm too old to touch these computers. I don't want to figure this out. This is someone else's fight. No, it's our fight. It's up to us to make these choices. It's up to us to remove that limiting belief from our mindset and try. And all I'm asking you to do, this is my challenge, I want you to try for 30 days. And this is a 30-day challenge. Every day, you are going to move in a positive direction towards understanding the online world just a little bit more. I don't care where you are right now, whether you have zero experience or, you know, a little bit of experience or all of the experience. I want you for 30 days to work a little bit in pushing in the right direction, because when you do this challenge, if you do it properly and do it successfully, at the end of this 30-day period, you're going to be a lot further down the road than when you started, and you're going to really understand what the necessary steps are, where you're lacking skill sets, and where you can reach and find resources to make you better, etc. You're going to leave this challenge in a much better place. So I would personally ask of all of you, as a personal favor to me, try to go online, try Twitter, try Facebook, try YouTube, whatever works for you and the best format for you. Take that action, get better, because we need more conservative voices online. So I promised you this would be short. And those are my 3 talking points, my 3 things for you. Number 1, when we're talking to people, we're telling stories. Number 2, we're asking people to vote their values, and we're asking people questions. And number 3, as a challenge for 30 days, we're going to work in a positive direction to make an impact, because in 30 days, when you have 1,000 Twitter followers and you're famous, you know, you can buy me a cup of coffee because you're making a lot of money now. That's really cool. We'll talk about that later. But you're going to be a better person. You really will. And that's really what this is all about. Self-development never stops. We always constantly have to keep learning. Much like reading books, it's that same process across the board. So always remember to leave everyone and everything better than you found it. And I hope everyone has a wonderful, wonderful Sunday tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rowe.
I've been asked to introduce Chairman of Michigan Conservative Union, Norm Hughes. I met Norm back in 2010 when I was running for state senate because one of my platforms was make Michigan a right-to-work state. And we did a forum, Norm, right here, downstairs in the basement. Gary Glenn, Jack Hogendijk, myself, Paul Kersey from the Mackinac Center. And we came up with the idea that we were going to make Michigan a right-to-work state. That idea came from one man. That was Norm Hughes. That one idea, the mission statement was to make Michigan a right-to-work state. That was as short as it was. Gary Glenn said, no, Norm, you're wrong. It's going to take decades, because he had to replace numerous legislators out in Idaho, spread out over about 8 years of elections, taking them out before they would vote for right to work. That was Gary Glenn's style. Norm says, no. I got a freshman senator named Patrick Kobeck. I got a freshman state representative, Mike Shirkey, in the House. And they're business guys, and they're analytical thinkers. And we're going to put together a plan, management by objectives. I never heard of that term. I saw his spreadsheet, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Every minute little detail assignment he had orchestrated, laid out the departments, task by task by task by dates. We had to get them accomplished or he would kick our butt. And you know what? We got Bill King from the UAW to put Proposal 2 on the ballot. You remember that? They were going to memorialize unionism in the state of Michigan. When it failed, Norm took that data for every district and went and seen every state rep and state senator and said, here's the polling data in your district. We got them. And then it was a perfect storm that just went from there, and it was because of Norm Hughes and this group right here. How many years ago? 2011? And we passed it in 2012. Give a warm applause for Norm Hughes, Michigan Conservative Union President.
Thank you. Well, we've run out of time, so I guess I can't give my presentation, but I'm going to run through a few of the slides at least and give you an overview. You know, that management by executive system is something we use in the Reagan administration. It's identifying objectives, what you want to get accomplished, and then setting up programs on how you're going to go about doing it. What are the steps you need to take? What kind of personnel do you need? How are you going to implement it? What's the time frame? What are the procedures you can use to follow it? Well, Michigan Conservative Union is organized the same way. We have very specific things we want to accomplish, and we're going to, whoops, it already advanced to one. We want to identify real quickly some of the problems. Of course, you know, upper left-hand corner is an example of government. It's got a sign saying, don't block the bike trail. You see that? And then, of course, the 5G thing, what they're going to put in our neighborhoods, Congress, the deficit spending, and, of course, Reagan saying that the federal government has taken too much money from the people, too much authority from the states, and too much liberty from the Constitution. And that's kind of in a nutshell what our problem is. Oops, turn it upside down. Radical environmentalism, globalism, redistribution of wealth, diminishing God. Meanwhile, you see Al Gore's $9 million mansion that uses more energy in a week than we might in a year. You know, Antifa out in the streets. It reminds me a lot of, you know, here's a caravan coming in and invading, 2,000 illegals a day. Michigan, 120,000 illegals costing us $100 million a year. And here, this wasn't from that. This was back from the Freedom to Work campaign. You know, they bashed our heads, they slashed our tires, they did that kind of stuff back then too. But you know, the governor's saying, no. His big money people saying, wait until the end of his term, we'll do it. No, we got a perfect storm. We're not going to take no. And we jammed it, and we jammed it, and we jammed it, and finally we got it done. Here's a map of what happened in the counties in the last the presidential election. All the red ones, of course, are Republican counties, people who voted for Trump, and all of the blue ones are who voted for, what's her name? And the national popular vote is something that keeps coming up. They took 30 of our legislators to Hawaii last year, and right away they came back and immediately tried to push this through, which would be a compact saying that whatever the national popular vote was, Michigan's vote would go for that candidate, regardless of what the people in Michigan said. So we have to continue to fight this battle, and it's going to come back, and it's going to come back because there's big money. One of the lobbyists from Michigan is being paid $20,000 a month to push this through. So, you know, we think if the Convention of States, another one we have to keep fighting. As a matter of fact, the Speaker's having an assembly this next week with Mark Meckler, the guy that's getting paid several $1 million a year to be able to push this through. And of course, you know, as Madison said, the most violent partisans and individuals of insidious views would strive to be delegates and would have a dangerous opportunity of sapping the very foundations. You know, they keep on saying it would take 3/4 of the vote, 34 states, to be able to put it into, to call a convention, and 38 to ratify it. Well, when we had the Articles of Confederation, they called a convention to amend the Articles of Confederation and threw it out and put in the new Constitution. The Articles of Confederation said the ratification process had to have 100% of the states. Well, 3 of the states, it exceeded their authority to be there, they took off. And so they didn't have 100%, so they changed it to 3/4. Next time it might be to 2/3 or 50+1. You can't count on it. If you open that can of worms, you're not going to be able to get that genie back in the bottle. It's just not going to happen. Now, when I was a congressional aide back in 1973, we went to the Supreme Court and we went to the Library of Congress saying, can we limit it if we call a convention? And they said, no, we can't guarantee that. They said in 1796, Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson asked the same question, and when he was told no, he dropped it like a heartbeat. Then we learned in 1788, within a year of ratification, before Congress even met on the new Constitution, New York and Virginia were clamoring for another convention. And that's when Madison became alarmed. What have we done here? So we have to keep fighting this. It'll keep coming back and keep coming back. So it's a continual fight. Of course, this is like the snake telling the fish, we got to stop you from drowning. Or like, you know, Custer saying, once open, you can't control it. It's Russian roulette. It's national suicide. And, of course, Mark Meckler driving George Soros off the cliff. They're trying to redo everything. They want to stack us up all in cities. You know, they don't want to have any rural land anymore. They don't want to have any rural farms anymore. They want to have everything go wild. And we're going to have to keep fighting this so-called sustainable development. It's a catchphrase. You can see the centers that they would have, and of course Detroit, Chicago would be a major center. And of course all the weird things that's happening here, the anti-social media, and some of that too, you know. So, anyway, it's democratic socialism because Soviet nationalism has already been used. We send our troops to foreign countries to defend their borders, but our politicians refuse to defend our borders. And of course, you see all of the Democrat chiefs with their fences around their places. Fences don't work, right? And of course, you see what's happening with the budget, the worth of the dollar. A kid born with a $56,000 debt on their head, you know. This is what's happening in this country. And you see the debt profile, Reagan up there, the first arrow, then Clinton, and then, I'm sorry, George H.W., then Clinton, then George W., and then Obama as we go off the cliff. And Reagan said, the greatest leader is not necessarily the one who does the greatest things. He's the one that gets the people to do the greatest things. So we are in the process of developing leaders. We had a great leadership school yesterday. I think we developed some great people who are going to do some great things. We're forming chapters of MCU around the state. We'll continue to develop. 6-8 years ago, there were 139 Tea Parties in Michigan. Now we're down to less than 40 that are active. So those people are still out there. We have to get them off their fishing boats and the golf course and back into politics a little bit, because it's only our future and our kids' futures. So we've got several projects. Project Kirk is a deeper understanding of what's going on. Kirk is the one that wrote the book, The Conservative Mind, that was the basis upon which Goldwater and Reagan and William F. Buckley Jr. and so on understood what the basis of conservatism is. If you go to our newsletter, Conservative Choices, when it comes out, and if you're not on the list, you need to get on the list. We always have Project Kirk. We're having our annual board meeting June 8th at the Kirk Estate and Library. Annette Kirk is a close friend, and I knew Russell when he was alive. A great guy that inspired people around the world. Last time I was there, they had a bunch of people from Portugal converting his book books into Portuguese. So it's just amazing how it's spreading yet. Operation Watchdog, you know, we want to change the color of the underpants in Lansing sometimes, you know, by letting these people know we're not going to take certain things, and certain things are wrong, and certain things are against your principles. You know, there's a lot of potential with this new speaker, who's a preacher, a young man, but he likes those $300 dinners that lobbyists take him to, and he likes those junkets to Hawaii and Williamsburg and Miami and Puerto Rico. I just keep telling his dad it's only a matter of his soul, you know. If a guy takes you out for a $300 dinner, he's expecting something in return, you know. So, and then we have Project Friedman. Now, you change public policy by changing public minds. In the Freedom to Work campaign, we changed public policy 16% in a 6-week period of time, purely by political activism of the grassroots. We had assembled a coalition of 218 groups with over 70,000 members and 20,000 businesses. And we turned them loose with specific talking points and things we wanted to get accomplished. And we moved public opinion that far to the point where even the governor didn't dare oppose us. So our mission, conservative governance, being a beacon of faith, truth, and consistency for traditional values, informing citizens of opportunities and acts of governance for conservative principles, and providing leadership and being a great partner for those seeking the same values and principles. So we have a statement of principles, we have plans, we have organizations set up, 501c3, 501c4, a pact, where you don't have the foundation yet, we're working on that. These are the tools that you need to be able to offer donors a number of options and to be able to do certain types of things in politics. So these are all elements of the plan, and you can see how CPAC fits into that. It provides annual and regional conferences, task forces. We will come out of this conference with task forces on energy and education for sure, probably on property rights and a couple others. And if you're interested, it's going to take 6 hours a month for 6 months to be able to work with a group of other 15 to 20 people. By the time we do that, we get about 600 hours of effort out of an expert group of people willing to roll up their sleeves and work together on problems. And it helps us learn to like and work with each other and take down some of the antipathy and the ego trips and the turf wars that sometimes we have in our movement. So it's a great way to work together. If you're interested, let us know. And of course, things like CPAC and what we did today, the plan has got, these are all of parts of things, what we did, prevailing wage repeal. That's going to save the taxpayers $400 million a year. So when they say they need more money for roads, we're saying no. You got $400 million in there. You've been collecting taxes since 2015 for roads. You haven't put it on roads. And when prevailing wage repeal kicks into gear, you'll be buying 1.25 miles of repair for every mile of road. You'd about 25% or more savings. So these are all things that we need to do and have been doing. The road thing, we really have to fight that. I hope you'll help with that process and keep contacting your legislators and say, no, Hell no. No. We just can't continue to raise taxes for every little thing that comes along. You know, if our drive breaks down, our garage door breaks down, our sewer pipe breaks down, we don't expect our neighbor to pay for it. And it's time we tell them, start spending the money as if it's your own and stop this waste, stop the fraud. So, car insurance. I shouldn't tell you this, but I took one of my pickups and I registered it in a company we own in Indiana and saved $1,000 on insurance this month, or this year. Just one transfer. Worst thing is, when we bought that truck, we got a $7,000 rebate on the truck, which means I didn't pay this, I paid this less $7,000. But they taxed me on the original price. So I paid $420 sales tax on $7,000 I didn't pay for the vehicle. On the other hand, I have an old beater, an old classic car, that at one time was worth $56,000. It's now worth $2,000 or $3,000. But I'm paying, when I buy the license plates, I'm paying it as if it's a $56,000 car. I call it a discrimination tax. You got a lot of bigger families, older families, minority families, and so on that buy old Eldorados and those big boats, and to be able to fit all their family in it, and they're paying as if they're $55,000, $60,000 cars. It's discrimination. Well, I've taken that to Lana Tice and some other legislators and explained this. These are things endemic in the process that you're collecting money on that you got to stop. My workers' comp on the companies in Indiana is about half what it is in Michigan. So anything I can, I filter through the Indiana companies because I want to save, you know? That's just normal business practices. So we've got many inequities in the taxation. We've got to, I think, break this move towards socialism. Michigan's been rushing there fast. And then I'm not going to be able to get into this, but I'm going to just give you just an overview that our Education Task Force, Phase 3, got into what happened in education. And you can see in the last 4 years of the Granholm administration, see how the red line is going down? That's the student population. We've lost under 8 years of the Republican administration, we lost 250,000 students. You can see the blue line is education spending. The last 4 years of the Granholm administration, the education spending went down in direct proportion to the student population lost. Republicans get elected and boom, $2.5 billion increase, despite the fact we lost 250,000 students. And it's still not enough. I was just shocked last Thursday when I sat in a meeting with the head of the Appropriations Committee in Michigan, a guy who used to be a Tea Party leader, and he said, we can't touch education. I said, you've got to. You can't keep subsidizing fewer and fewer students, and your own studies show the quality's going down, and you're going to reward that with more and more money? It's a sacred cow. You got to stop it. So I hope you'll help get that word out, too. This is $1 billion in $100 bills, you know. Under Republican administration, we went up over $10 billion in 8 years. Just unbelievable. So, you know, in Tennessee, the second greatest education in the country, they're educating at more than $6,000 a year, less than what a typical student here is, and we're 41st in quality. You think about, what are we getting in Michigan? Indiana, rated 26th nationally in cost at $11,000. We're spending over $14,000 a student. They're third in quality. Their average score is 21.8, 14.7, 11.5. Michigan's is minus. There you go. You're spending up there your math, your social science, your language courses, your science, your math courses, all steady and going down, money going up through the roof. So, you know, we're ranked 15th in spending and 41st in quality. The top 10 achieving states, all but, DC, Hawaii, and Minnesota had higher overall per pupil spending levels than Michigan. The 7 highest achieving states had lower spending than Michigan: Tennessee, Indiana, Florida, Washington, Oregon, Iowa, in California. Michigan's private school spending is about $6,654 compared to over $14,000. In this particular school, it's under $4,000 a year. And they're three-year grade year levels ahead of the public schools. You think about what you're getting. 29-to-1 student-teacher ratio in East Grand Rapids, the second best public school in the state. The 5th and 18th are 39-to-1. So they keep on, you know, and the trend is we have fewer students. We have fewer students. Want to keep all the infrastructure, all the teachers, all the buildings, all the janitors, all the administration. We have 118 non-teachers for every 100 teachers, 100 teachers in a typical school system in Michigan. So, you know, you look at that, and it proves that clearly that decreasing the number of students isn't producing quality, because the quality keeps going down. In the meantime, we had 230 schools. This is 2 years ago. 230 of the 829 high schools in Michigan did not have one, not even the valedictorian, college-ready student. You think about that. We are failing big time. So, you know, inflation goes up, education is leading it. And like I say, I'm going to have to slip through this. I encourage you to read the whole study. This last one was a study showing how increased spending affected the quality. You know, Australia increased their spending 270%, the quality went down. New Zealand increased it 230%, quality went down. It's stunning. There is no correlation between how much you spend and the quality you get. So take that home with you, and please, it's not being against teachers. The typical Michigan teacher is making about 64 grand a year now, which isn't bad for about, you know, 800 contact hours, 750 contact hours a year. We don't begrudge them that a bit. The problem isn't with the teachers. I know some good quality teachers, even ones that aren't as conservative as us, who are quitting because they can't stand the system and what's happening in the public schools. So clearly, the money could be put to better use. And I'm going to stop it there, but there's a whole other section to this that goes into more details. And I would, if you're interested in the entire study, I'll be glad to send you the slides on it. We got a lot of work to do, and you know, a lot of people doing a little bit can make a big difference. And I applaud you for being here, for taking this whole day with us today. I hope that you've enjoyed it as much as we have putting it together for you. It's been a lot of work, but a lot of fun. I thank Jay and Alex and Dean and Darlene and Joan and Linda and so many people that did so much to put it together. And stick with us. We got a lot of work to do, and you're going to have to help. Thank you, and God bless.
Access Vision, your voice, your community.